It's around here that I'm going to stop with the reminisce solely because after Michigan was Killer7, the groundbreaking collaboration between Suda51 and Shinji Mikami under Capcom for the GameCube that was meant to bolster the underperforming console. To this day, I consider it his magnum opus, and there's a huge possibility that I might cover it, so I want to leave its creation in the dark.
This has been a somewhat long time coming, originally meant for an earlier season before falling through and hinted at heavily within the No More Heroes video. Killer7 is what I will call Suda51's seminal work. First seen it showcased on channel regular Cybernet, Killer7's heady blend of 3D cel-shaded graphics and trippy visuals easily caught the attention of my preview best self. Too bad the game's heavy M rating meant it was destined to lie dormant in the back of my mind until many years later, come Super Great Friends LP of it. Reawakened was my fascination, now tempered with an older mind and understanding of how frankly audacious Suda's games can be. If the Syndrome trilogy, The Silver Case, and Flower, Sun, and Rain were the foundation, Killer7 is the house that Suda built, unabashed with its interests. Much of what would come to be in later entries in Suda's macabre and ridiculous world has a tie to Killer7, itself making heavier focus on ideas introduced in Syndrome, Case, and FSR. It makes sense seeing as our subject for today is sometimes marked as the last game within the Kill the Past trio, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is where I will refer you back to the No More Heroes video on a rundown of Goichi Suda, Suda51. I ain't traversing ground I have already covered, so let's get right back up to speed with a post-Michigan report from Hell Grasshopper Manufacturer, which in turn brings us to the GameCube, Nintendo, and their relationship with Capcom. While I think a lot of people view Nintendo and Capcom's relationship during the 8 and 16-bit eras as a highly profitable one, it was mostly born out of Nintendo's stricter licensing terms. For a while, when Nintendo dominated the market, worldwide I'm speaking of since this was entirely separate from America's gaming crash, though that incident did help Nintendo secure a stranglehold on the games market, which in turn would actually form a Western resentment towards Eastern development that we still feel today, you were basically subject to their demands. If you were a third party, you either tried, and more than likely failed, to kick off your own console in the hopes that you can compete with Nintendo, or you played ball the way they wanted you to. Taken from Ars Technica, Kyle Orland goes on to mention that the idea of the third-party exclusive really came into its own during the 8-bit era, mainly because Nintendo forced it to. To publish games on the ultra-popular Nintendo Entertainment System, licensees had to agree to a strict non-compete clause that guaranteed those games would be exclusive to Nintendo's system for 2 years. Most developers were more than willing to sign on the dotted line to get access to the NES's tens of millions of players, squeezing out external game development resources for upstart challengers like the Sega Master System and Atari 7200. Basically, Nintendo fired the shot heard round the world, a start of console exclusives. Whatever your thoughts on the idea of exclusivity in the gaming market is, mine are pretty dim on the subject because of what I'm going to say after this internal monologue, the undeniable truth is that exclusive games are a means to increase revenue through limiting access and enforcing brand loyalty. In short, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. The console wars did bear a positive as increased competition sought out all companies to try to push hardware to the limits, but it birthed a rather insular mindset that devolved the consumer into an animal. Instead of celebrating games as a whole, you flew a banner of which tribe you belonged to. Something we still have today with rabid Sony fanboys who are way too fragile ideas like not preferring a title on their console.
Horizon! The Last of Us! Forspoken!
As I will now have to worry about inane comments from this subset of the public who are overtly defensive with their milquetoast titles, they're lost to the madness of fear and hunger, my mentioning of the Genesis wasn't off the cuff. It plays an important role in this part of the history, but not in the manner you think it does. Instead, EA would wind up taking a challenge from the console developer that would change licensing deals. Electronic Arts was one such company that felt the weight of Nintendo's success in the marketplace, as cartridges and consoles were far outbeating PCs of the era. EA stuck to floppy disks and saw quite a bit of success until around 85 when the NES saw American shores. Taken from an issue of Game Informer chief creative officer at the time, being Gordon, amidst the following. Nintendo came out and we felt it was dirty and kind of a step backwards. We had mixed feelings in the company. There were some who said, "You don't get it, this is way more fun." Middle school kids and suddenly presidents were playing games instead of just nerds. EA was too deep in denial. Indeed, it wasn't until Toys R Us pulled EA aside to show them the numbers. Nintendo's cartridges were smoking their floppies. EA had to adapt or die, but in the face of Nintendo's monstrous reach within the industry, they didn't want to get in bed with the Leviathan. As Bing in the interviewer states, Nintendo was operating with near monopoly power, Gordon says. They had like a 95% share of the console business, and they had earned it because they took a huge risk. If a publisher wanted to get in bed with the NES, they had to fly to Japan, state its case for a development system, and if Nintendo deemed it worthy, there was only one deal on the table. That's what led EA to Sega, based on the fact that such a one-sided relationship was essentially a ball and chain, not in a fun way, and that EA had previously worked on a few 16-bit games for the Commodore and Amiga lineup of computers. One problem. Sega was aiming to challenge Nintendo, thus they emulated the same licensing deal. A few back and forths between EA and Sega, one in which EA would boldly claim to be Sega's lone partner in the war against Nintendo, a partnership that would last until the Dreamcast, led to a gauntlet to be thrown down. If you want a different deal, you're going to have to reverse engineer the system, aren't you? Famous last words said by a Sega executive as not only were a few engineers signed up with EA, Bing went the distance and checked with a few lawyers to see what the legality of said challenge would be. After they sifted through all the jargon and made sure EA wouldn't be infringing on anything, the boys Steve Hayes and Jim Nichols did the impossible: reverse engineer the Sega Genesis. Booking a slot at the 1990 CES, Bing basically gloated to then Sega CEO Hayao Nakayama with the following: "We're going to run our own licensing program unless you agree to our terms." Effectively, Sega signed up EA with a less stringent deal that would become the norm moving forward, leading to Nintendo having to copy their move, kicking off the console war proper. To cut down on a subject that requires its own video, you prefer Super Castlevania 4 or Castlevania Bloodlines? Third parties reaped the benefits as there were two camps to exploit. Yet this was all changed with the precursor to the prodigal son, the PlayStation. Discs were the way of the future. Partly because of what I said in Resident Evil Survivor, there was more memory which allowed developers space for bigger and better things, but also because of another reason that plays more importance here: cost. Taken from IGN, Nintendo had counted on the cost of cartridges preventing piracy, but those extra manufacturing costs were passed along to gamers. Gamers that had watched the price of titles inch up with each generation. $30 for the NES, $40 for Genesis/SNES, experienced sticker shock at the price of Nintendo 64 cartridges during the first year of the console's lifespan. Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings debuted at $60, but later games in 1996, such as Mortal Kombat and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, were topping out at $80. Compared to games on the PlayStation and Saturn that came in around $40 to $50, Nintendo 64 games were simply too expensive for the market. A $70 cartridge in 1996 is the equivalent to approximately $91 in $2007. That's far greater than the still decried $60 price tag of most third-party games for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. But that is only part of the issue. You still had to order cartridges, which was a crapshoot in of itself, as you were towing a fine line between paying not enough for too little cartridges or too much for unneeded surplus. This applies to the whole industry, not just Nintendo, who could afford the costs. Third parties found it easier to jump to Sony or Sega as discs were less turbulent, and their issues pertain to loading an actual game portion of development, not all this budgeting mumbo-jumbo. The only positives of the 64 cartridge was the anti-piracy features and the quicker loading, but the negatives were so widespread. Cost, as previously mentioned, the limited space of the cartridge, and the haphazard nature of the 64 itself. Jim Clark's experimental chip utilized for the 64 was avoided by Sega with good reason. There were many faults with using it as the basis for a console. I've already gotten the Sony fanboys hating me, so let's bring aboard the GoldenEye 64 fans as well. That game runs like ass. It is the perfect example for why a lot of developers jumped to Sony. The perfect maelstrom of the lacking cartridge and somewhat underperforming 64 chip meant development would be hamstrung if you chose to work for Nintendo. Dare I say it, the 64 was a bitch of a console to work with and was its generation's PlayStation 3. Time is a flat fucking circle. While managing to outlast their eternal rival Sega in console development, Nintendo ultimately gave up the ghost for cartridges for the time of the 6th generation and opted for discs for the GameCube. Micro discs, to be exact, which still had the same issue of space, as I distinctly recall a few GameCube titles needing 2 discs. Tales of Symphonia, the major one for me, though killer7 did come on 2 as well. And this would be a key issue pertaining to the GameCube. For as much as it wanted to separate itself from the 64, it did very little to scrub off the stigma of the previous console. While there are dozens of issues pertaining to why the GameCube saw mild success compared to its contemporaries, there is a Nintendo Dojo roundtable where people bring up their qualms with the Cube, some of which are better than others. Perhaps one of the bigger reasons as to why the purple lunchbox had trouble operating in the market was that it had a weak third party. Name a single console exclusive GameCube title that wasn't straight from Nintendo, developmentally or outsourced, so no F-Zero GX, Star Fox Adventures, or Assault, or the Pokemon spin-offs as those are Nintendo licenses, or saw releases on its colleagues. If you're struggling, that's a-okay as it is a somewhat small list. For examples, you have Cubivore, Custom Robo Battle Revolution, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, Remake, MGS Twin Snakes, Mega Man Network Transmission, Geist, and the Day of Reckoning WWE games. A few of you probably said Tales of Symphonia, but it got a cheeky Japanese release on the PlayStation 2, disbarring it from the pool.
So that was a fucking lie.
Meanwhile, the PlayStation 2 had the Jack series, the Sly series, the Ratchet series, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, Shadow of the Colossus, Okami, God Hand, the first Rumble Roses, the SmackDown series of WWE games, the first SmackDown vs. Raw, the Xenosaga trilogy, and those are only the exclusives. Shared in the library with the Xbox was Silent Hill 2, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and previous star on the show Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. This honestly created a divide between the factions, as it basically branded the GameCube as the kid console while the PlayStation 2 and Xbox were for adults. The color scheme of the GameCube and its controllers, plus the additional widgets released for it, remember the DK bongos, only added to that comparison in the theater of public opinion. Now, this doesn't mean anything to me. A console could look like a hungover Mardi Gras parade, and I'd still play it as long as it had good games and a controller that wasn't shit. But public opinion is a dangerous specter to deal with. Case in point, the public opinion on Resident Evil Survivor was that it was bad, but I found it to be a pretty fun time and not worthy of the criticisms it received. This is leaning way more into the abstract and how the collective unconsciousness of humanity works and how opinions on this grander scale are formed, regardless of if the basis for them are proven or not. Much like how the Mandela effect works. Once the idea or statement forms traction, it becomes a truth to those who believe it in spite of reality, to the point that if enough people believe, it becomes reality. Berenstain or Berenstein, anyone. That's how you get criticisms against the GameCube as being a childish console. Jeez. Already getting into the mind-bending, I haven't even started talking about killer7. So to actually bring ourselves back down to ground, Capcom would make a surprising announcement in November 2002. They were shacking back up with Nintendo to help out the GameCube and break free from the stagnation of the industry. They announced a total of 5 games that would be exclusive to the GameCube. forming what was known as the Capcom 5. Reporting the coverage, IGN gave us this. Since before Nintendo's console launched last year, IGN had heard that Capcom was working to bring content to the GameCube in a very big way. When it was announced that the main line of the Resident Evil franchise would be exclusive to the GameCube, we assumed that was the extent of the new relationship. Apparently, there's much more to it than that. In addition to the totally revamped Resident Evil 4, Capcom will be delivering a variety of new gameplay styles to the GameCube. The futuristic action shooter product number 03, PN03, the spectacularly dark and cel-shaded Killer7, the comic booky superhero sim Beautiful Joe, and the fast-paced sky-high shooter Dead Phoenix should all prove to be one-of-a-kinds when they release next year. Overseeing this monumental undertaking was Shinji Mikami, establishing himself as the general manager for the 5, but he was also one of the directors chosen for a title, his being PN03. Others chosen were Hiroshi Shibata, RE3 Nemesis, for Resident Evil 4, though he was later replaced by Mikami, Hideki Kamiya for Beautiful Joe, Hiroki Kaito, RE Code Veronica for Dead Phoenix, and one person outside of Capcom, Goichi Suda and his company Grasshopper Manufacturer for Killer7. And I wish that was where the announcement stayed, as a sort of triumph for the GameCube as it restructured its relationship with the third party. The title of Capcom 5 was an albatross around the neck. A horrid instance of misspeaking, like accidentally outing yourself as a normie at the gathering of the Juggalos. Back to IGN, though Capcom Entertainment previously said that all the Capcom 5 games announced last November were in fact exclusive to GameCube, it called the information wrong, citing a miscommunication at its annual Gamers Day event in Las Vegas this week. The 5 titles announced initially as GameCube exclusive were Beautiful Joe, Dead Phoenix, Killer7 product number 03, and Resident Evil 4. Capcom US representatives clarified repeatedly, however, that only Resident Evil 4 is a definite GameCube exclusive, and that the other games may or may not be ported to other consoles at some point in the future.
So that was a fucking lie.
In all actuality, only one game stayed on the lunchbox, PN03. The rest were ported to other consoles except for the case of Dead Phoenix, which became its oxymoron, cancelled in 03. And with that, we can get to Killer7. Told you that there was enough to cover for its own video. So while we can assume that development for Killer7 began around the time before the Capcom 5 announcement, Suda does provide a bit of an anecdote that is highly important to Killer7's production. Again, around this time, Suda hadn't really broken into the American market. He was a staple in Japan and kinda Europe, as Michigan sold more in the EU and Australia than the home country. He was finding out that there was a larger market for his brand of style and substance, which would come to a head with 2 instances, when he received a call from Shinji Mikami and when he visited E3 for the first time. For the former, Suda and Mikami go a little ways back, as Hifumi Kono, Clock Tower's creator, introduced the two back during Suda's days as a human. They became friends as a result, leading to a somewhat funny exchange. Suda recounts to Destructoid that he suddenly called me out of the blue, so I went to see Mikami-san and he said, "Suda-san, do you want to make a game together?" My reply was, "Yes, of course." Mikami handpicked Suda and his company for the project, leading to the latter experience with E3. As Suda states in an Anime News Network interview, the same one I used for No More Heroes, "Before the project started, I came to E3 for the first time," Suda said. "When I saw the show, there were so many great games from around the world, but of course there were no games of mine. I still remember how sad I felt and how overwhelmed I was. I saw all these great games and I was completely overwhelmed. I thought, I really want to create some good games that can be presented at E3, but it was still a distant dream and I never imagined that I would be able to create something for an international audience. I never imagined that I'd be able to talk about it to people in America like I am today. Mikami-san said to create this game for the worldwide audience, and that really gave me the chance to create something, and I'm forever in debt to Capcom and Mikami. Essentially, Mikami was acting as the gateway for Grasshopper Manufacturer and worked surprisingly closely with Suda, testing out prototypes of the game while bringing out the best in 51 in his writing. Returning to Destructoid, Suda would elaborate with, "That's right, I received a lot of advice. I also had asked a number of people to help out with the writing, but I was found out by Mikami-san straight away. This isn't your writing, is it, Suda-san? That's no good, you have to write it all yourself." Then I said, "But it's fine if I don't write this part, right?" To which his response was, "No, you have to write everything." That's how much faith Mikami-san had in my scenario writing ability. It was such high praise that I got a little carried away. With this kept in his mind, Suda basically explored every avenue that drew his interest, incorporating previous elements from his other games while adding even more callbacks to his life as an undertaker and his love of film noir and wrestling. To really capture how freeform Suda was being during development, here's an interview conducted by Gamasutra describing a little bit of the development process for the game. While by now budget restraints were a relative thing of the past, the philosophy of invention continued in Killer 7, particularly in Suda's much-discussed reinvention of game controls for the title. I destroyed the existing controls such as button A is punch, button B is jump, and so on, and I reconstructed the whole operationality. Instead of moving with the D-pad or stick, Suda made A the run button, leaving the traditional movement device only as a selector for new actions, or to choose if you want to go straight or turn right. Suda, and by extension Mikami, were taking the medium of games and turning it on its head, as I haven't even mentioned that most of the budget for Killer 7 went into the slick visuals or the story, Killer 7 focusing on having simpler gameplay that helped facilitate the interweaving of all aspects of a game. This wasn't without its problems, as Killer 7 saw multiple delays and had a development period of 3 years, meaning out of all of the Capcom 5, not only was it highly ambitious like Resident Evil 4, its denser aesthetic and controversial topic coverage meant it was more than likely going to be a money pit. And by the time it saw an 05 release on the GameCube and PlayStation 2, the overall opinion was mixed. Not one person agreeing on their critiques with Killer 7, except for one statement: "This is a cult game." Killer 7 has no layman appeal. It's in the same vein as a Lars von Trier film or Marquis de Sade story. You don't go into any of these with your brain off like a blockbuster or as a casual observer enjoying a flick. You're gonna have to think, and the piece as a whole will challenge you in a multitude of ways. It will lay dormant in your mind as you toss and turn trying to figure out the puzzle presented to you, and how you feel regarding the ideas it presents and how they relate to your worldview. That's not a condemnation of this style of storytelling or presentation, or against any specific audience. You either gel with art house or don't. Dense is the word, as while I may be in the vein of people who enjoy this section of media, I made a Forsaken Fear and Hunger reference earlier if that shows you my frame of mind, you do have to prepare to watch art house. Experience is the other word, like experiencing a national sport in real life as opposed to on TV. Killer 7 did later see a Steam release on November 15th, 2018, which updated the fidelity of the visuals to modern HD ratios like 4K, making it one of the most beautiful games ever designed. You can guess which version I played from that alone. For a little bit of a wrap up, the cutting room floor for Killer 7 is positively stuffed. So much so that what was originally intended for the game was placed into hand in Killer 7, a combination art book, lore dump, etc. A lot of background material is within its pages, making it an interesting flip through, much like the comic book that suffered the same fate as the Saya no Uda comic book adaptation. I can't stress it enough, watch SGF's Let's Play of Killer 7 as it's one of his best. Unbeknownst to us, our story begins in media res as we follow a sharp-dressed man down a street corner. Name, Garcian Smith. Occupation, government worker, as we see another man, Christopher Mills, hand him an envelope. Another government worker, their job made clear when Garcian approaches the building Celtic. Garcian has been contracted for the assassinations of the 14 people inside. People, I should say, as supposedly they aren't normal, to say the least. Neither is Garcian, as when a camera spots him heading inside, he warps out of existence and into another person. Name, Dan Smith. Previous occupation, cop. Current occupation, assassin.
You don't want to go any further. It's dangerous. My friends are all dead. They were all murdered by people that look like this. I have been chosen.
Oh, shit. There's more than 14. Those bastards are breeding.
A hooded vagrant tries to turn Dan away to no success, mostly because they transform themselves into what is known as a heaven smile. More than 14, it seems, with Dan and, as we find out, the rest of the Smith Syndicate having to traverse the war zone that is the Celtic. Introductions are to be made, as this is the killer7. Dan and Garcian have already been acquainted with us, so let's get to the others as they all hold the same job. Name, Coyote Smith. Former occupation, thief and vagabond. Has a somewhat sour relationship with Dan. Name, Coyote Smith. Former occupation, prefers not wearing shoes. Name, Kevin Smith. Former occupation, non-applicable, mute and albino. Name, Con Smith. Former occupation, non-applicable. Blind but has good hearing. Name, Masked Smith. Former occupation, professional wrestler. I think we all know who's the strongest. But they are just the main members of the killer7, as floating around in the greater Smith Syndicate are their informants, all of them previous targets of the killer7 and are, for lack of a better term, ghosts that follow the main group. To run them down, they are the Gimp Vincel Dil Boris VII, Iwazurikov, or Iwazaru for short, the free-loving Travis Bell, Iwazaru's lackey Kakazaru and wife Mizaru, the split-sided Yoon Hoon, the demented killer Kess Bloody Sunday, and the disembodied head Susie Sumner. Wherever the Smiths go, these ghosts follow and help them out when need be, like pointing them in the right direction or giving them a needed item. I say this because the Celtic is a mess. Many still inside and subject to an explosive death from the Heaven Smiles. Whatever they are, apparently they've infested the United States, at least that is what Travis says. The killer7 has been assigned to dealing with them, but for what ends is unknown. If that wasn't the only mystery, the Smiths find a carrier pigeon with a letter from Johnny Gagnon to Amir Parkreiner. To save a bit of time, all these notes explain a bit more of who the killer7 are to Amir, with Johnny getting increasingly annoyed that he isn't getting paid. More on this with the last pigeon. After some exploration through the Celtic and going through the Vinculum Gate, a pseudospace home to the gatekeeper who asks for soul shells for passage, the Smiths reach the top of the building where another camera spots them, bringing Garcian back out. Travis jokingly calls him Amir while pointing out how close a connection Garcian has with the boss. Said boss coming out to deal with the target of the killer7, Angel. Name, Harmon Smith. Former occupation, big old question mark. His age seems older than it is.
I'm the mother of this sacred place. Our 4 children served their purpose. They didn't die in vain. But our other 9 children were killed by you. What do you want from us? Is it so bad that we have a purpose in life? We are only serving our gods. At heaven's command, we will kill the unwanted. We must get rid of bad trees from their roots. I hope you are not one of them.
Good night, child. It's past your bedtime.
Angel spouts some cryptic hoopla, which doesn't impress Harmon or his 50 cal. Like a lot of other Angels featured on this show, though, Angel puts up a bit of a fight for the Killer 7, and even when she's terminated, she responds like nothing happened. Round 2 of Woman vs. 50 cal sees the man behind Angel make his appearance, Kun Alon. If he wasn't a terrorist, he'd make for a good Dracula. And like the Count, he's older than he appears, his relationship with Harmon going way back as the two talk like old friends. Their conversation hints of things yet to come, but tonight is Friday, a prime opportunity to have fun like catching bullets that send you flying to the Space Needle. Job, well, done?
No matter how many times you try, the result will be the same.
Yes. Like our chess games. You always seem to win.
Do you know why?
You tell me.
Because you're a bad player.
A new generation of children will bring order to this age.
You're a good friend, but unfortunately, our interest is not mutual. We both have become burdened with so much, and we don't have time for fun anymore.
No, there's always time for fun. It's Friday night.
Let's dance.
Harmon, the size of the world has changed. It's changed to the size where you can control it with your hands, just like a PDA. The world will keep getting smaller.
If none of that makes sense to you, don't worry, here's the lowdown. In the year 1998, world peace was achieved through the forming of a world coalition. Setting up peacekeeping groups and banning air travel plus the internet, the world had changed. 2002 saw intercontinental highways connecting the continents together, and 2003 the banning of nuclear energy research and usage. Waste was taken to the Gibsoft Islands for disposal, while ICBMs were launched into each other in the stratosphere, creating fireworks, a sign of peace. Too bad the Heaven Smiles didn't get the memo bombing the UN signing ceremony of the World Security Treaty. The attack caught everyone off guard and left the UN scrambling as all nations started to distrust the other. In steps the Killer 7, the only people able to deal with the Heaven Smiles.
To reduce the likelihood of terrorism. The world had changed. In the year 2002, a network of intercontinental expressways bridging the Atlantic Ocean opened, connecting the two major sides of the world. In the following year of 2003, the construction of a mass-scale distribution system began, and a man-made landmass as large as a city was built over an ocean. The use and research of nuclear energy was banned, and all radioactive waste and materials were disposed of at an energy disposal facility in the Gibsoft Islands, a remote set of islands off the coast of the Indian Ocean. Now, international eyes were on the elimination of the intercontinental missiles that posed the biggest threat to world peace. In order to eliminate these weapons of mass destruction, they were launched outside the Earth's atmosphere and intercepted by other missiles, exploding them on contact. People around the world watched these explosions light up the sky, as if they were some kind of dazzling light show. These explosions, later known as the missile shows, became the symbol of world peace. The world was filled with hope. But a new threat was on the rise. At the signing ceremony of the UN's World Security Treaty in the year 2003, a new breed of terrorists who called themselves Smiling Faces attacked the ceremony. The devastating attack caught the international society by surprise and temporarily crippled key operations in the United Nations. That assault was aimed at nothing other than using terrorism to create terror. Fear spread throughout the nations like wildfire. There was nothing the police or the military could do to counter the Smiling Faces. The only ones who had any chance of stopping these Smiling Faces were the omniscient and almost godlike professional assassins. The key players behind the scenes of the four powers utilized their connections and called upon the group known as Killer7. Their only hope rested with them.
Enjoying his breakfast of Wheaties and coffee, Garcian receives a call on his trailer's landline. At first, it seems like a usual political party call to action urging him to vote for them, but the voice coming through the other end is Mills, meaning Garcia has a job to do. That means meeting up with Harmon for a mild briefing, but, well, the Harmon we see here isn't like the one we met previously.
What? You want to eat? Make it fast, okay? I have to go to class at 9.
He's in a comatose state, and his caregiver Samantha Sitbon is both out of uniform and abusing the defenseless man. It's only when Garcian interacts with the TV do we see the Harmon from Angel, who already has an inkling on what is going on. That being a shitstorm of brewing as someone has launched 200 missiles at the island of Japan. As the American higher-ups converse with the president on what to do, Mills tells Garcian he has to travel to DC to take out Toru Fukushima, the man who's a go-between Japan's UN reps and the United States government at his own restaurant. Seems like Japan, and by extension the UN, has betrayed America and all the parties of the United States wants this job done.
Washington?
Restaurant Fukushima. It's a popular joint.
And the target?
The owner of the place, Toru Fukushima. See, he's the middleman between the Japanese UN representatives and our government.
A government job?
It's a job from all the parties. Japan has turned against us.
So that's why they're gonna hit Japan?
Well, it's a possibility. It depends on how they move.
It'll be a blow, all right. What will happen to Japan?
It's up to the president. They have 18 hours.
All hell's gonna break loose over in Washington. And I sure as hell don't want to be there.
Making I'm either assuming the long car or train ride over to DC, the Smiths find restaurant Fukushima crawling with smileys, inferring that they are a weapon of Japan, and the bombing at the UN was probably a false flag. Heads up, this is where things get confusing, as the Smiths just step knee-deep into a political conspiracy. As what I will call the remnant psyches explain, as whenever the Smiths kill someone they become a hanger-on, Japan is mostly dominated by the United Nations Party. Don't mistake this as a one-to-one for our UN. This is a United Nations under Japan, as the only thing we can be certain on is that World War II happened and America became the sole dominating superpower. Japan's Liberal Party used to be in control but was deemed weak and taken over by the UN when a group called the Union 7 drafted up a document called the Yakumo. It ensures the prosperity of any country that has it, with Toru Fukushima one of the members of the Union before it fell to infighting and is considered to be holding on to it. America doesn't want a strong Japan as they'd be able to rival the nation, while the Liberal Party wants to take back control from the UN Party as they want peace with the US despite the country viewing the island nation as baggage. Does this seem confusing to you? In short, the Killer 7 are on a retrieval mission with two other groups interested in Fukushima. The Liberal Party, as they send an agent by the name of Julia to recover the Yakumo so Japan doesn't get blown up, which it still probably would, and a previously unmentioned fourth organization by the name of the International Ethics Committee have sent Jean de Paul, who is first seen disguised as a chef for the restaurant. His dealio isn't made known to us, but he does gawk at masks headbutting a bullet out of the air.
What's in your right hand, Chico?
Please don't. This is just a...
Put your arms down!
No, it's not like that. This gun is a...
Don't move, amigo.
Please, don't shoot.
Stay still!
Ah!
What were you doing here?
Cleaning up. Our head chef always tells us that an ideal kitchen is a kitchen clean enough that you can lick the floor. Anyway, it's the least that I can do for them.
The others? The chef? The waiters? Where are they?
Those guys with the strange smiles. You saw them?
It's dangerous, Aki. Get out of here.
Awesome.
Either way, Fukushima gets taken out by Julia, who's then silenced by the Smiths, neither having the Yakumo. Not knowing what to do next, Garcian hits up Hiro Kasai per Mills' words to know where to go next. The Kaku building. Jean de Paul was last spotted there trying to interrupt the peace talks between America and Japan, which ultimately fail. UN party members Hiroyasu and Shinya berating their underling Kenjiro Matsuoka for it. Handing him a gun, the two UN higher-ups are blasted by Matsuoka before he turns the revolver on himself. Kun Lon intervenes, however, granting Matsuoka untold power, birthing Matsuken. Oh, and Shinya and Hiroyasu are revived as horrific parodies of themselves.
Make you happy, but it won't make any difference.
Oh, we've done it many times. Killing our seniors, but it's how we've always settled things.
Look at you. Don't even have balls to pull trigger.
I can say this much. This boy's got no future.
You know, a real gentleman would dress more appropriately before his death.
Who the hell are you?
Why do they treat elders like we are such nuisance? Only if they knew how much we truly contribute.
I have to agree with you there.
He's yours. So, what do you think, partner?
I think he is finally seeing things clearly now.
Well, you'll always be together.
Off-screen, Jean de Paul passes off the Yakumo to Matsukin, the IEC assassin's loyalty lying with the UN party, making this far more confusing than ever, as Mass drops some loose ceiling tiling on Jean for a kill when the Smiths reach him. Looking for public enemy number 1, the Smiths only find Shinya and Hiroyasu, who through Kaede's deagle they're put down. Again. What's done is done, however, with a sunset befalling Japan.
Pong.
It's the one who designs first that wins.
I didn't know monkeys could design.
Don't underestimate the monkeys.
Pong.
There are dogs bred for fighting, and they're mean sons of bitches.
How do I stop your barking?
Chi.
What? What can one knight possibly do? Don't you care about winning?
You really are a stupid dog. You'd better pay attention before someone puts a bullet in your head.
Shut up, monkey. Ricci.
Too bad. Like I said, I know your train of thought. Lawn.
Bullshit! Enough of the caviling. This is pathetic.
Hey, yo! Cheater! That's a footy-tan! You got no hand.
What?
Shit. It's all over. What can you do when the whole world has its eyes on you?
Almost everything. Destroying 1 or 2 nations? It's an easy task here. The promise made 30 years ago wasn't a guarantee. It was only the beginning of a countdown. Look at them. They're heading toward hell.
What's sad is that we've gotten used to this. I mean, our senses. That's pathetic.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not human.
Okay, now you're not helping.
A lot less web-like, a year after sunset, a strange man by the name of Andre Almeida challenges Garcian to find him in Texas. This religious leader knowing a lot more than he's letting on about what is happening. With Mills providing his info and Harmon his blessing, Samantha trying to proposition our guy after casually raping Harmon outside the TV, Garcian and by extension the other Smiths make their way to Texas. Almeida is a baffling bloke as he has a city based entirely on him, but it's half and half Heaven Smile and real people. Stranger still, he's the CEO of a company by the name of First Life, but he was originally a lowly postal worker. No one besides Almeida knows what First Life actually does besides operating as the largest domestic trading company. If you couldn't tell, that's a front with First Life nothing but a cardboard cutout. Almeida has a deal with the American government where he's allowed to hold dominion over inner city and hang on to a piece of the Yakumo if the military can run a few experiments like injecting Almeida with a few diseases to create vaccinations. The whole reason why Almeida challenged Garcian is that the CEO knows the American government will want to test out the Heaven Smile virus to make a cure for it, Andre preferring death over a grin.
Of peace. But our corporation, First Life Inc., it doesn't exist, no sir. It just runs commercials. You see, people judge books by the covers. Oh, today's job is done. Ah yes, you just might be able to meet today's lucky guy. Don't be alarmed. These are good citizens. No Heaven Smile. Our man, Clemens! Congratulations!
Me? Is it really me? Wow, I can't believe it!
Relax, Clemens. Your job has just begun. Calm down, or you'll frighten Lady Luck away.
You're right. What should I do?
Like I told you, first, you need to relax. Your job will be here any moment. Clemens, This is yours. Go ahead, take a spin.
Huh? This car? Is it really mine?
Of course it is. Now take it and do what you want with it.
It's really mine.
Hop in and find out. Bon voyage. Don't drive yourself to death. Come here. Clemence's job had a $5 million price tag. This is what he gets to do. This is what I call driving yourself to death. It's a human being. How long will Clemens last, or will he cross the finish line? If he makes it, he wins. I needed bigger thrills, so I infected myself with all kinds of deadly viruses. I overcame them time after time, discovering vaccines and creating medicine on the way. I overcame all the symptoms. But them smileys, they're different. The risks involved are at another realm. I mean, it's flirting with fucking death itself. I want you to kill me. If I catch Heaven's smile, you gotta kill me. I heard you're the only one who can kill them.
Not that it matters anyway, the military intervenes before the Smiths can kill Olmeda, injecting him with Heaven's smile, taking out everyone besides our syndicate, who promptly put him down. At least Garcian and Andre's apprentice, Clemens, carry the will of the Cloud Man.
I'm General Lynch from the United States Emergency Countermeasure Defense Department. I want to thank you for cooperating in the capture of Mr. Olmeda. As you may know, this city is run by the military. This city remains a vital instrument for determining our country's safety standards. So I ask you, forget what you witnessed here today.
General, beginning countdown, sir.
Aim!
On your mark. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark!
I told you to kill me. Now I'm going mad. I can't control this urge to kill. What are you gonna do about it? Damn. Get this over with once and for all.
Take cover! Hurry! Huh? Oh!
What happened to Mr. Olmeda? Huh? This blood. It tastes like Mr. Olmeda's. So, he's dead, isn't he? I've always had a sixth sense. If I had only attained Mr. Olmeda's level earlier.
Clemens, you're in control of things now. Walk down the path of life. Don't succumb to weakness. Take the big risks.
Rest assured, Master Olmeda, I will watch over this town. Our way of life stands eternal. May peace rest with our great Olmeda, our Messiah.
The name's Andre Olmeda.
Keeping to the borders of America, we find ourselves in the POV of someone who has a clear issue with prostitutes, and what we'll find out later to be the immigration office. Taking a young girl with him from the building, Curtis Blackburn has gone full scorched earth because his partner in crime, Pedro Montana, has reneged on their deal with the organ trade. He needs to be taken out, the Killer 7 chosen for the job. Interestingly, when Garcian is summoned by Harmon, we find out that Dan and Curtis go way back to the days of the Seattle Defense Force. Curtis killed Dan before, but now it's time for revenge as the rogue black market organ trader has been spotted in Iskland hunting his prey. Like I've done before, I'll give the rundown as relevant footage plays, as this recap is kinda hampered by the lack of cutscenes that aren't just a singular persona talking to the Smiths. Curtis is an agent of the American government alongside Pedro Montana as they were tasked with gathering children to use as raw material for the creation of Heaven Smiles. A few things of note. America has its hands in the creation of the Smileys, thus explaining why Inner City was swarming with them. Pedro, Curtis, and Dan all were members of the SDF, where Pedro skimmed money off the top during the organ trading, leading to Curtis killing Dan as he was framed by Pedro. Pedro handled the boy candidates, while Curtis the girls. The immigration office is in on this as they supplied suitable prospects, and Curtis is utter scum. Put 2 and 2 together for why I say that, because organ trading and killing aren't the only things on his mind with the kids. Too bad the Smiths barely miss Curtis, having a standoff with his minion Ayami Blackburn, leading to them tracking the old man to his residence.
If you're looking to play doubles, go find someone else, all right?
Do I look like a guy who wants to play doubles?
Oh.
In the meanwhile, Curtis butchers Pedro's family as a message to his former partner before gunning him down. Paying his crimes onto him, the Smiths face off against Ayame again and kill her, while Dan duels against Curtis and wins, subjecting him to the fate that the old man carried out on an untold number of young girls.
Look at you. You've changed considerably. Into a badass, if I may.
Yeah, and you've changed a lot too. Into an old man.
I went to see the devil. Now it's your turn.
Oh, my pupil, so tenacious of life. Guess I have to kill you again.
Shut up, before you run out of breath.
I got rid of those smiles. There's no one to disturb our game. It's just you and me.
Sounds fair, 'cause I hate holding back. Even for an old fart like yourself.
Talk all you want. I won't need 6 bullets for you.
Or 4 for you.
We'll begin when the bird flies. Can you remember that? Pink-ass punk, you're going down.
Looks like this is your end.
Oh, guess you think this is pretty funny.
You got quite a hobby here, old man.
Doesn't hurt to have a hobby after retirement. What do you think?
What do I think? I think what you got here is no different than what those guys do at immigration.
All I ever wanted was to shed light on my life.
You have no idea. You're nothing but a sick maniac.
Guess it's time to close the curtains.
Trying to die in style? Give me a break, you sick old man.
Life, wonderful indeed.
This wouldn't be the only run-in the Killer7 has with assassins, as a few months after the Curtis debacle, the Sentai heroes The Handsome Men assassinate Democratic Party member Steve Thunderson for unknown reasons. Said slaying was predicted in the last issue of their comic, this week's release seeing harm and die to them. That won't do, so the Smiths head to the Dominican to take out Trevor Pearl Harbor, the artist behind the comic who might be controlling the Handsome Men. In all actuality though, this is one giant long con by the PR company Electric and Line, who are buying up any properties they could get. Trevor only having mild precognition, and thus writing the storyline for the Handsome Men with what he sees. He couldn't predict his own death, mind you, by Handsome Black, nor the deaths of the other Handsome Men in their video game when the Killer7 accepted their challenge. Which, in turn, leads to Garcian coming into contact with E&L agent Love Wilcox, who describes that all the company does is pump out propaganda, and that they should be stopped, telling Garcian that she'll take them down single-handedly. Alter ego, ladies and gentlemen.
Trust me, I know, 'cause I wrote them. Kill Dan! Give him the old handsome wink stuff! Handsome wink!
Handsome beast! Get down! I suggest you don't get too involved. Unless, of course, you want to end up like this fellow here.
You think you guys can kill me?
I didn't know Killer7 had a sense of humor. It's showdown, Dan Smith. Handsome wink!
You'll pay for Black's death, bloody psychopaths, Killer7. Prepare to die. We are the Punishing Rangers, the Handsome Men!
Sorry, but your stupid series ends today. I'll finish you all at once if that's more convenient.
Fine! Let's settle this once and for all. 7 versus 7, fair and square. The place will be Broadway, New York, at 0400. Wait! I'm not finished with you yet!
Talk about characters out of a comic book.
They're coming! Wow! It's the handsome men! Awesome! Handsome red! Handsome blue! Handsome white! Handsome red! Handsome purple! Handsome white pearl! Handsome gold! We are the Punishing Rangers! The Handsome Men! They're really here! Did you see that? A real handsome pose!
Hope you guys are ready.
I must say, to decide where you will die is a gallant act.
Fitting for the killer7, don't you think?
I think that's enough chit-chat. Shall we begin?
Why not? I've got the ultimate cards matched up. Let's get it on!
The girl's an avid gamer. Her world of games and the real world coexist as one.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Killer Garcian. My name's Love.
How do you know my name?
Because I write the story, mister.
I don't follow.
Here's the thing. I'm working for Electro-Online Inc. I create propaganda using media, you see?
You're saying that they're all Electro-Online's advertisements?
That's why I'm gonna bring them down. I'll make them pay for Trevor's death.
Can you really do it?
I'll make sure justice is done. But in my book, though, you be sure to check it out in next week's issue. I'm really glad we met, Mr. Killer Garcian.
The pleasure's all mine. Love, your passion is inspiring to us all.
Thank you. I'll be watching you, mister.
Near the end of the 2011 year, Matsukin makes his resurgence via the death of Hiroka Sayan. Harmon is nowhere to be found in his room, Garcian instead entering the forbidden room of his trailer to find the Patriarch and Kunlun playing chess. Our guy's appearance seems to unnerve the two for an unsaid reason.
Do you want to hear a story, Harmon?
Why not?
There once was a young man who had a promising future. The center-back position was his to keep, and no one could take that away from him. Any play was a fair play. No one blew the whistle on him. Everybody loved him. Not to mention his campus sweetheart. Ooh, she was something. They were the perfect couple. He graduated from Columbia with an MBA. His opportunity was infinite. He could do whatever he wanted with his life. But was he satisfied? No. Every night he would cry, begging the Lord. Something deep within needed awakening. Then one day it happened. That moment when the subconscious rises to the surface. Well, the way it triggered was very simple. It happened when his mother came onto him one night. As if the spirit of Jack the Ripper had taken over his body, he stabbed and stabbed until you couldn't tell who she was. You know what I think? An angel whispered into his ear. The angel gave him the extra courage he needed to give her the divine retribution she deserved.
Sure she wasn't the Hell's Angel?
I'm pretty sure she only had good intentions.
You really are a villain.
I had nothing to do with it, but I must admit, my memory has become a bit misty these days.
This latest mission turns out to be a doozy as well, with the target being Matsukin. The only holdover from the UN party, he's the leader of 10 million Japanese hidden all over the world. That amount of people is enough for a block vote, granting the remnant a seat in Congress. What that would mean is anyone's guess, but more importantly, where did Harmon go? Mills tries to answer that question, but promptly gets sniped from the knoll, leaving Garcian without an answer as he and the Smiths head to the Hotel Union. Besides a run-in with a vanishing Edo McAllister who seemingly knows Garcian, the Hotel Union trip is a bust. All Garci gets is two shadowed men at the top floor pointing him towards another location, though the only one that speaks looks surprisingly like a young Harmon Smith. Back at the overpass, Garcian meets up with his new informant Linda Vermillion, who also happens to be Mills's killer. Outright calling Mills a slave to the government, Linda tells Garcian to find the truth for himself, then seek out the real enemy, bringing him and the Smiths to Coburn Elementary School. In the past, a US agent by the name of Holbert was sent in to spy on the school and one student in particular, the elusive and mysterious Amir Parkreiner, the Bloody Heartland. See, it just so happens that presidential elections live and die at Coburn as the Ministry of Education controls everything. Whoever steers the school steers the US. Holbert killed for his findings by Amir Parkreiner under the orders of the Japanese-controlled Ministry of Education. When did Japan overtake this American political system? At the end of World War II. Oh yeah, and Johnny Gagnon was killed by Harmon Smith after he tried to go after Amir for not paying him, meaning the Smiths themselves were targets as well, like Holbert. And somewhere in between all this madness, Garcian winds up winning a game of Russian roulette against presidential candidate Benjamin King before uncovering a few truths. Giving up his vision ring, the item that allows the Smiths to spot the Heaven Smiles, Garcian finds something in a safe in Coburn that awakens his third eye and sees that Harmon was the principal of Coburn for a time.
I hate to say it, but you got guts, son. No way I'm gonna die today. Or tomorrow, for that matter. At least not until the election is over. It takes more luck than this game to run a country, damn it. I'm on a roll. I'm hot. It looks like Lady Luck's on my side today. What's a country? Who are the people? What are politicians? Who knows? I just wanted to become a president. All I need is to hear the empty click of this gun, and my dreams will come true. It looks like you lose, son. Sorry, but a deal's a deal.
This gun holds 7 bullets. I'm a professional. You can't fool me, old man.
You and I, we're both sick. The only time we feel alive is when we put our lives on the line. It's a sad reality. But we people are never satisfied. We'll always seek a higher rush. The history of the United States rests within the walls of this institution. It's an old tradition that has continued since the first presidential election. I want you to see it through to the end. And by the way, women are all the same.
The press is gonna be all over this one. The United States cover will be blown.
So this is dirty politics.
The presidential election is in the hands of the Education Ministry. They manipulate the votes and bring forth political leaders.
Who's he?
Greg Nightmare. He was the chairman of Education Ministry.
What is United States? What is the purpose of the president?
I'm Japanese. How the hell should I know? Figure it out yourself. There are more important things. Shit. Like finding out who you are.
One quip from Matsukin later, who drops in at Coburn to also uncover the truth of the US, the Smiths throw down with the corpse of Greg Nightmare, who seemingly kills all of them besides Garcian, who picks up his golden gun. Revelation time as Garcian heads back to the Hotel Union. He is Amir Parkreiner, a former Japanese agent turned US dog. He killed a version of the Smith Syndicate as part of his duties to the Japanese, killing himself in the end only for one of Harmon's persona to find his corpse and absorb his personality into the multifoliate persona phenomenon, explaining why Garcian is able to change into the other Smiths and why the remnant psyches hang around. This whole entire situation has been one giant game between Harmon and Kun Lon that has been going on for an untold number of years. This Cold War between the US and Japan is but a single encounter in their affairs, the most important piece here being the Education Secretary, as he controls the Ministry of Education. With him dead, the US is a ship without a captain, but who knows if anything will change. Whatever the case is, Garcian is done with being a lapdog, killing his past and reassuming the identity of Amir Parkreiner.
No, it wasn't me. It can't be. It's all a misunderstanding.
Three years later on Battleship Isle, Amir takes out the remainder of the Heaven Smiles while also confronting Matsukin. With his death, Japan would be crushed under America's might. If he stays alive, the UN will strike back, leading to open war. Whatever the case may be, our tale ends in Shanghai, Old Harmon and Kunlun reenacting their dance from the end of Angel, the world turning but never changing. Okay, so we don't get the full picture of Killer 7's story, mostly because there is additional material in the shape of Hand in Killer 7. It explores much more of the background elements of the world, as well as the history of a few characters like Kunlun and Harmon Smith, and adds the characters of Jacko and Miss Jacob, who are almost like the architects of this whole entire plot. However, I think knowing all that information floating away from the foreground is less important than knowing the theming and ideas Killer 7 tackles. Like, learning about the IS Corporation and the creation of the Heaven Smiles is neat, but it isn't required to understand what the game is trying to say. It's mostly there as an explanation for the characters, not a tell-all as to what you're supposed to take away from Killer 7. With that said, Killer 7 intertwines many of its themes together using abstraction as the basis, lining up associated imagery as shorthand for metaphor. There is a lot here, so let's work our way from small to big as working up the ladders when things start growing confusing. The first and foremost thing I want to get across with Killer 7 is that the most important piece of this story is Garcia and Smith's struggle to move on from the past. Understanding the dirty and hypocritical politics subsuming the world of Killer 7 is secondary to witnessing Garcia reacquire the identity of Amir, though this through line does mingle with the overarching plot. In bare essence, Garcia Smith is a man without an identity. Not just because he acts as the secondary figurehead for the Killer 7, though that is a play on Garcian's character. Ever since he was a mere park grinder, he was the lapdog of someone. From the start and during his time at Coburn Elementary School, Amir was an agent of Japan, sent over with falsified information to obscure his background so that he could easily slip under the radar and sway the American government. This puts into perspective how honestly little is known about Amir and Garcian. Holbert's cassettes call to attention how much of Amir's life is fake, with a birth and death date ranging far away from the events of what led to the creation of the Garcian persona to a fake blood type and a social security number that shouldn't exist. Amir's past is a black hole. Amir might not even be his real name. My listing of all of these falsities does have a purpose in creating the image of an ideal government wet worker. No ties, no thoughts, no emotions. Simply put, Amir was the tool of the Japanese government, told only as little as he needed to know to accomplish his and by extension Japan's goals. To actually look for a purpose, to wrap your head around the world stage and what actors perform on it is detrimental to your job. Now, Garcian isn't the only one affected by this, as literally every other assassin or governmental worker gets hit with this reality. Mills dies because of it, and many of the targets of the Killer 7 seemingly know more about what is going on to the point that the American government sends them out to protect its interests. But because Amir was far and away the greatest assassin that ever lived, an ace among aces, America thought it would be a waste to simply kill the boy. So, with a sleight of hand, Amir changed allegiances from Japan to America after discovering the truth of his nature as a Japanese drone. This is when he first met Harmon, or a vessel of Harmon, this seemingly chance encounter leading to the Hotel Union killings and the deaths of a version of the Killer 7 led by the first persona version of Dan. Under the realization that he has killed an untold amount of both seemingly innocent and corrupt individuals, Amir winds up committing seppuku, dying as a free man until Harmon absorbs his personality using the multifoliate persona phenomenon. Harmon's aligned with the United States, having a major hand in a few governmental affairs. Thus, the newly christened Garcian Smith was under US control none the wiser. However, and this is what splits Garcian off away from the other members of the Smith Syndicate, the current day one, Amir's own mental fortitude, spirit, will, what have you was so distinct compared to the other parts of the gang that little bits and pieces of the original personality of Amir hung on. Compared to the rest of the Smiths barring Harmon and maybe Dan, Garcia not only has the most personality, but acts as the face of the group. Whenever a job is handed off to the killer7, Garcian is the one meeting informants and gathering information, inferring that he has at least some form of restrained autonomy, a gilded cage. Hell, Garcian goes rogue after Mills' death, leading to him uncovering a number of truths, so there is something special about Amir that almost detaches him from humanity and places him closer along the lines of Harmon and Kun Lan. Where I think Garcian's journey takes an interesting turn is that the last few targets of the killer7, the ones we deal with during the game, each have a sorta allegorical connection to Amir in the past. While Angel might seem like a fast introduction to the world in media res, the words of the eponymous target linger on me as an exclamation of foreshadowing. While the line, "At Heaven's command, we will kill the unwanted, we must get rid of bad trees from their roots, I hope you're not one of them," is strongly associated with the larger scale plot of Killer7, the phrase, "Is it so bad that we have a purpose in life? We are only serving our gods," can be wholly applied to Amir and Garcian. At that moment in time, Garcian was no different from Angel. His purpose in life, as dictated to him by Harmon in the US, was to kill the unwanted, to rid bad trees from their roots. The underlying subtext is that the word bad is carrying a lot of obfuscation around it. All of the Killer7's targets are threats to the United States and its sanctity. Sure, we get an explanation that the Heaven Smiles cropped up around the time the world found peace, but that is leaving off how powerful the US has become and how the UN is a tree planted by Japan. With a snap of its fingers, the United States can sink a country, which is what happened to Japan circa Sunset, but who knows how countries under the UN operate, or if the attack during the signing was a false flag so that Japan could have justification. This is jumping the gun a little bit, so back to my fixation on the word bad. The meaning is malleable. We're not talking in the case of ethics or morality. Good in this case represents anything that will further a goal, bad is the opposite. The United States and Japan will take advantage of anything and anyone to help bolster political power and continue their imperialistic will, regardless of who or what they have to deal with. Case in point, the United States employs the Killer7, Japan Kun Lan, and the Heaven Smiles. Bloodshed doesn't matter as long as you're spilling the enemies. This is taken further with Sunset, as that is when these 7 properly step onto the world stage, seen as they are one of many people after the Yakumo. Pawns on a chessboard meant to shift the balance in their country's favor, as with the case of the Liberal Party agent Julia and the IEC's assassin John DePaul. The Yakumo itself is described to ensure a country's growth into the ideal nation, with it falling into the hands of Japan's UN party, meaning America would have someone to challenge it. That won't do, so despite the country putting on airs of caring for Japan, that is mostly a farce. The secret talks were destined to break down, and while Jean de Paul was an unaccounted for element aligned with a different faction, the IEC played a round of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. America needed DePaul to disrupt the talks so that it could position Japan as ungrateful. The failure of the peace talks could be fobbed off as Japan unwilling to negotiate, and it's not like America wants to keep the country around regardless of the Liberal Party's efforts to form a truce. The Killer7 were sent as cleanup detail so that the truth of Sunset had its loose ends cut off, with Japan framed as the villain in this scenario for the American people. We never get an explanation for who fired the missiles at Japan, but my hunch assumes that was an American ploy. Ironic, as DePaul passed off the Yakumo to Matsukin, so he played both America and the Liberal Party, ensuring that the UN would rise from the ashes with greater zeal and hatred for America. Both countries needed him, as without Jean, America doesn't have a scapegoat for the destruction of Japan, nor the UN, the Yakumo, and the will to rise back up. Either way, Sunset shows to Garcian how far America and Japan will go to protect their interests. The Killer7 wasn't tasked with taking out terrorists. They were gravediggers for 80 million Japanese. Cloudman and Encounter are the opposite of Sunset in this regard. Instead of an outward look at the world and America's dealings with it, the two targets instead prefer to look inward. particularly the dastardly lengths the country is willing to go to ensure they stay the #1 superpower. Andre Almeida, out of all the Killer 7's targets, is the odd one out, as he isn't a direct hit from the United States government. His challenging of Garcian seems more to do with passing off info to him that would help later on. And before I continue, that's another little detail that makes Andre stranger. He calls out Garcian by name. This makes it seem like he knows way more than what is going on, and with him carrying a piece of the Yakumo and the international dealings of First Life, Almeida screams rat lying in wait. He was working with America on vaccines, so he probably knew about the dirty dealings of the country. There is higher than a 1% chance that the US also knew of Andre's part of the Yakumo, but instead of potentially fumbling the bag with a naturalized citizen with a huge following, they played it cool. Okay, Andre, you keep your scrap of the document and the wealth earned, but only if you take part in our experiment. Said measures included infecting Andre with a variety of diseases, and him having to oversee the military town and hide its true purpose, a testing grounds for Heaven Smile. The town is a mix of actual people and Heaven Smile test subjects, Almeida there to assuage the humans that nothing is wrong. It's only when the CEO breaches the contract by contacting the Smiths does the American government go into full cover-up mode, infecting Andre with Heaven Smile, so it seems like the city itself was a bad tree and sympathetic to the Japanese, as Heaven Smile is viewed under the public eye as the weapon of the East, despite Heaven Smile's existence as the hot new black market weapon. America is happy to prune away branches that no longer have a use, adding another crack to the Garcian persona. He too is expendable. How long until he's taken out back? Encounter, meanwhile, shows the depths of America's depravity. Organ trading and virus production are merely two cogs in the economy. Curtis Blackburn is such a damning figure for the US, as he's on the payroll. The Seattle Defense Force was a governmentally approved body that handed out assassination contracts like candy, and I can assume that with the money made from the black market, America either turned a blind eye to the whole affair as Curtis had put in the hours to be whitelisted, or the government actively encouraged his activities. The latter rings truer as Curtis and Montana went through the immigration office, implying that the US handed them candidates and that all the children they received weren't US citizens. Meat free for exploitation. Sounds a bit like a mirror minus the outcome, as these children either get turned into glue for use under America's attempt to create Heaven Smiles, as outside of Angel, Sunset, and Alter Ego, why are Heaven Smiles crawling all over the damn place? Or if you're unlucky, Uncle Curtis gets quality time before you bite the bullet. Tangent-wise, this would explain the Coliseum, as it allows a testing grounds of sorts for the Smiths against new Heaven Smile variants, and we know that Battleship Island is the actual location of this pseudo-space, which is somehow a hop, skip, and a jump away from Garcian's trailer, begging what the true purpose of the island is, as it's considered neutral ground between America and Japan. Back to the SDF, personal affairs is what broke the pact apart, Montana being figured out by Curtis, leading to him throwing up the deuces and cutting all connections, turning him into a target. If he squeals, the UN and the world will know that ganging up on America is the morally right thing to do, so the US sends the Smiths. Curtis kinda blew it for himself, his nature as a punk with a gun casting him into the role America needed him to be. Shooting up immigration and having a public face of organ trader is a fine way of allowing the government to disassociate from their red hands. And it's around this time that Garcian starts becoming disenfranchised, reviving the mindset of Amir and his memories of suffering from this level of micromanagement. The fact that Garcian decries the dead body of a kid before sneaking into Curtis's manor is the first real glimpse of reawakening. Alter Ego is the weirdest target to relate to within this analysis, as even within the whole of Killer 7, it seems like an odd respite away from the heavier burden of Encounter and Smile so you don't grow mentally over-encumbered. The shining light for Ego is the reason for Trevor Pearl Harbor's bounty. Electric and Line want complete control over the Handsome Men comic. This airs on the more symbolic side of things, as this is the dichotomy of Garcian's relationship with Harmon in the US. Trevor having creative control over the Handsome Men comic is code for Garcian having control over his life. Both are pressured by a larger force into a role, and the two have otherworldly powers. This is a parallel with even the target name Alter Ego in on this observation. And what does Trevor do with his mild precognition? Foretell the slaying of Congressman Steve Thunderson. It could be read that Trevor incited the attack just from extenuating circumstances, but what's odd is that the Handsome Men were strictly designed by America to face off against Heaven Smile, begging what role Thunderson had in the larger conspiracy. An infectee of the Smile virus meaning to blow up Congress? Maybe. But why does Trevor's story seem more like a warning? Handsome Black kills Trevor without a second thought, so clearly the artist was a thorn in someone's side. Was the attack the means for removing a thread that needed to be purged to protect America's bottom line? Or was Thunderson a sacrificial lamb meant as a double down on anti-UN policies? If this was a power play by the US government, that means the killer7 would have probably moved on to assassinating dissenters within America that hadn't actually committed any crime besides wrongthink. Trevor was innocent in this case, crying wolf at the literal wolf eating its own. Better yet, where are Electric and Line's loyalties? They want the Handsome Men comic, and we know that they push out propaganda, so how close are they to US politics? Do they have a direct line to the government? Is this a too big to fail situation where E and L will be bailed out by the country because of how interwoven they are with America? I mean, once a corporation grows large enough, it has this type of sway. Just look at Disney. This spun web and the killing of Mills pushes Garcian over the edge as he opts for his own investigation into the American government, finding out how deep this well runs. America's own voting system has been rigged from the start. Coburn the epicenter for the presidential election. No one is free within the US. Whoever controls this one school controls the entire country. Education became the greatest tool of manipulation. America birthing a rigid society that thought only for their country up until post-World War II, when Japan managed to take over Coburn. At the very core, Coburn is the exact cause for Amir's state of being, and has inflicted the same unquestioning mindset to countless others. No one publicly is the wiser, as mostly criminals are sent to the school, inferring that a good deed of educating the lowlifes of the earth so they can no longer be miscreants won't arouse suspicions. How can the school be corrupt if it's engaging in a morally good idea? How can any system be corrupt when it states it has our best interests in mind? Upon reaching the undeniable truth that social bodies and constructs large enough to enact changes on a wide swath of people or culture run by those with personal interests ensures that said systems are always under attack from corruption within and without, Garcian reemerges as Amir. He becomes free and kills the past of his connections. The choice within Lion to either kill Matsukin or not doesn't matter because at the end of the day, Amir doesn't care. He's been wronged by both America and Japan, and thus what outcome happens doesn't mean anything. It's like watching the Super Bowl when you don't like either team. Amir would prefer to stick to his own devices as he's seen the cold heart of both. And this trickles down to us, presenting the case that not all is what it seems. That national pride and belief in your country might just be a fart in the wind. If I were to say what was one of killer7's other themes, it would be the detriments of patriotism and nationalism by way of thorough examination. Killer7 doesn't place a lot of trust into large operating bodies because a system can always be exploited by those that work within it or outside forces. Neither of the two countries featured in this story are shown in a flattering light, both America and Japan depicted as outright ruthless to their aggressors and conniving to a fault. And it's not because either or are stated to be the villain. Killer7 does damn well to showcase the extreme severity of both the country's actions and how you can take away some form of good intention from a few of their actions. Japan is a country on the brink, while America is under attack. Calling a spade, Killer7's political climate is cold. Taking over Coburn to indoctrinate untold millions of kids into Japanese sympathy is still indoctrination. You're taking away free will and changing them into a tool, blunt and unthinking. A cog without self-preservation. Heaven Smile is an infection, so who knows how many, blinded by brainwashing, have thrown their life away as a living kamikaze. Japan has chosen this route, so maybe there was a justification to nuke the island off the face of the map. How many of those 80 million were Heaven Smile if Japan's leading UN party enforces heavy tradition of killing your superior? But that's in the realm of uncertainty, and undoubtedly America still has the blood of innocence on the stars and stripes, with the sunset and their choice to employ the black market. The interweaving game of spy versus spy for the Yakumo is a confusing pileup of allegiances and assassins which didn't matter in the long run, as Matsukin was granted power through Kunlan's God Hand. Who is there to say that the Yakumo can grant power? The Union 7 devised the document only for the group to fall apart through internal struggling, and Andre's background is barely revealed, so maybe he has a part of the document, or maybe he's that talented. The postal worker has a clear bias against Olmeda, so his words aren't trustworthy, bleeding over to the propaganda battle between America and Japan. Monkey and dog are thrown around as somewhat racially charged insults during the secret talks, implying that perhaps the two countries have a much deeper resentment than first thought. If you wanted to continue down the line I presented, Garcian is a slave of the government wanting to break free as it doesn't value him as a person. Only an object, a weapon, a minion to do its bidding. Matsukin shares this relevance too, slaving away under his higher-ups before silencing them and advancing up the ladder, the key disparity. Matsukin never achieves true freedom like Amir because he plays into the hand of the system and continues the cycle. Ideas and images of slavery show up from time to time, like Harmon and Samantha's relationship or the human workers of First Life. Killer7 isn't afraid to play hardball with the topic, Samantha becoming less of a person when Harmon is in control, to Clements growing especially excited for being chosen for driving himself to death, as it means it can elevate his status despite how risky the game he has to play is. Those were small scale, but it can be applied all the way to the top of the tree, America and Japan preferring its personnel mindless and malleable. Anyone who walks out of line is an immediate danger to security, thus Mills and Fukushima's assassinations. Trevor Pearl harbors a slave to the whims of Electric and Line, indulging the idea that even creative works aren't safe from turning into gray paste by a corporate or governmental system as a type of slavery. In turn, that feeds into the propaganda pipeline, as who wouldn't follow the words of their favorite hero? If Superman says America all the way or Kamen Rider Ichigo Japan #1, how many people would listen and follow these governmentally supported and prescribed principles? A question like, what is the purpose of the president, merges this all together, as are they not a hypocrite for promoting peace and free will by bending those of others? Is a president, king, government, or god even able to lead or serve without twisting, accidentally or otherwise, their citizens, subjects, or followers' support into blind adherence? Even if that figurehead has good intentions, power is a slippery and dangerous slope down to a hell of one's own making. See this whole conflict. All in all, there are no heroes or villains here besides maybe Amir, if that, and it's one big fucking mess. Almost like how real life can be a murky shade of white or a lighter shade of black. It's up for you to decide what is right and wrong, not to let some overarching entity tell you what is what. Placing your faith in something too big to fail is a disappointing recipe that'll leave you with a stomachache. This is what I mean by Killer7's sneering disapproval of the gung-ho attitude tied to national pride. Every country has a skeleton or two in the closet. You can enjoy the country you live in, But don't let that blind you to corruption or misdeeds carried out by senators, governmental officers, and higher-ups, as they shouldn't be allowed to put the people they've promised to serve in harm's way. They shouldn't make a game out of the lives of citizens, which becomes a recurring metaphor within Killer 7. Harmon and Kun play chess, the secret talks have mahjong, you can interpret Clements driving himself to death as a game as I did earlier, and Garcian and King play Russian roulette. It shows how little these people in positions of power are truly thinking of the common man. The 80 million lost in Japan was no different than taking a pawn in chess. Manipulating the electoral vote in America, the same as placing your opponent in check. King's barter for losing Russian roulette is to tell Garcian how to pick up chicks with complete efficacy, a far cry from Garcian's wager of having to kill the president. That's a massive gulf, making it doubly ironic as Keen is sweating bullets picking up the revolver while Garcian is cool and collected, even calling out the Emperor's stand-in, as in new clothes, that the gun has more bullets in it, showing how those in higher positions of power are just as fallible, if not more so than a commoner. If you really want to dive deeper, Harmon and Kunlan's plans are directed by the game. Kun earning the west coast of the US and placing the SDF in the city because he beat Harmon. These are massive decisions carried out in the same manner as how a regular person might order dinner. Pure, unadulterated instinct, second nature to us that divides and labels. The real tragedy of Killer 7 is as Kunlan says, the world doesn't change, it merely turns. Humans will come up with reason after next to combat each other via the unwinnable game titled tribalism. It means to demean and disclude us. It fosters hate in its wake and drives us to sheer tyranny. Harmon and Kunlan might as well be the avatars of tribalism, for as long as the world turns, it will be their chessboard. Kunlan's tale of the football player emphasizes this, as even when we have everything and should be content, we find ways not to be. We are but pieces to the duo, but that doesn't mean we have to follow their game. Emir sure as hell doesn't, and reinforces the idea that maybe the status quo should be challenged if it enables injustice. That tradition can be a heavy anchor weighing down true progress. Don't settle for false peace when you can go out there and make it for real. I guess is what makes Killer 7 fascinating to cover, as what catches your attention is what you tend to focus on. I've always had the viewpoint that you can somewhat overlook the grander elements of the plot, as the core of Killer 7 is about rediscovery of the self, confronting the hardships and pain of the past to step forward into the future. Emir's deeply personal struggles relate to me more than the worldwide mystery and conspiracy, and I think that's what leaves Killer 7 with a multitude of interpretations. Our guide is just as lost as we are in the whole scheme. And Killer 7 is pretty dense content. You can make a statement for just about everything in the game story, such as why Almeida makes his appearance in front of the Stacy concert is because it's making a case for how newer generations aren't falling to old traditions. They see through bullshit to the truth, unafraid to point out hollowness where it resides. That takes a new swing for why the stadium blew up, as you can craft a bunch of reasons. Stacy could have been a publicly endorsed musician associated with key political groups of any side. A mouthpiece meant to spew without any original thought in its head. The continuation of Harmon and Kunlan's game starting in Shanghai implies that America in the long run got its just desserts, the same way it also implies that maybe America has to move its assassins internationally, as none of the threats the country has to deal with now are on home soil. What's to say that maybe China picked up Japan's torch and is the main leader of the alliance to end America? You can go on and on and on with tiny elements and details, as there's much to latch onto, but seeing as I have other tabs to get to, I'll leave the conjecture and theorizing for the time being. Still to this day do I think Killer 7 has one of the most beautiful art directions imaginable. It captured my imagination back then, and it still does today. I don't know how a game can be a mixture of an avant-garde nightmare and minimalist dream, yet Killer 7 manages just that. And remember, this was originally released on the GameCube and PlayStation 2. This game is one of the codifiers of the era, as whenever I hear people disparagingly use the phrase "looks like a PlayStation 2 game" to insult how a modern game looks and or feels, I want to casually remind them that the 6th generation was and still is home to some of the most breathtaking and inspired looking games ever. Yada Yada brings up SMT Nocturne again as the go-to example, but because this is the re-release, Killer7 has the best of both worlds.
Irashamase. Welcome. How many in your party, sir?
I want to talk to the owner.
May I ask what it's concerning?
Yeah, I'm here to kill Mr. Fukushima.
Certainly. We'll be delighted to serve you.
Is condition right pass? That is the face of the representative of the largest company. What is general company? Where is an ideal city? What is made of city on this desert? And it is impossible to understand. The condition of the idea with young generation is upset.
Hurts, doesn't it? Hurts, doesn't it?
You're fucked. You're fucked.
Don't make me pee.
Shit.
The high fidelity coupled with the fantastic art direction makes this one of the cleanest games I've ever seen in my life, but for specifics, let's get down to how killer7 handles its world. For the most part, killer7 is an analog to our world, only with heightened exaggeration. Take the Celtic building, you get the idea that it's kinda like an apartment complex or some other downtown building, but the general color scheming of the rooms and the oddity of the architecture makes it feel completely alien. Rooms can be a single gradient from ceiling to floor, and the mixture of a washing room coupled with a library makes it seem like the Celtic is some abstract vacuum where facets of a modern-day office building or apartment have been blended together. This makes the mundane far more impossible or improbable. Like, your mind can't catch on to what the building is or how its floor plan is laid out, creating a somewhat isolating feel, leaving you only with the dull hum of the AC, the pitter-patter of smiles and their laughter, and the backing musical tracks. It puts you on edge, and that never really goes away when killer7 tackles more realistic locations.
The Master. It is very dangerous. It is very, very dangerous. He is in this back. It is him. It is the Master. By no means. Didn't you come him for a murder here? Oh. You are a fool. You are a fool. I am not trusted. You are a fool. It is an absolutely impossible thing. You do not know his fearfulness. You are a fool, Master. You were deceived by Mills's fool. The waywardness is under fool's name.
Continuing into Sunset Part 1, Fukushima supposedly exists in Washington, D.C., but the whole air and vibe of the eatery comes straight out of an ukiyo painting. For point of reference, the Kaku building where Sunset Part 2 takes focus in is apparently down the block from the restaurant, but they couldn't be farther apart even if they tried. One looks like a fairly standard and unassuming office building hiding a gambling den, the other is a realm unto itself. Restaurant Fukushima further adds to my point about the Celtic building in that killer7 is wonderful in making locations much larger than they actually would be. Restaurant is a poor description for Fukushima, as it's more like an inn with how much square footage it covers, having a few subset of buildings and a feng shui garden. Cloudman only ramps this up as it makes the state of Texas this strange land, blotted by sunlight and overrun with gradients. Every building is sun-bleached and without blemish, calling to attention the insides of the houses and areas within Cloudman as they actually have features. The diner especially seems like it comes from a different place entirely, as if it's acting as some sort of safe haven within the desert town. Even the First Life office looks like a facade when you run up to it, a little bit of foreshadowing seen as the company is a scam.
Nos vemos. Nos vemos. Nos vemos. Nos vemos.
About the most normal this game looks is during encounter, but even Iskland plays up the fair theme with the abstract funhouses, and Curtis's house once again has an unrealistic floor plan. By this merit alone, Encounter stands out because it's trying to seem conventional. There aren't any abstruse components to either the amusement park or Curtis's house that stand out like the mishmash of the Celtic, or the separation from reality like Restaurant Fukushima or Texas. It's normal, which makes it more uncomfortable to explore because that ties into how Curtis carries out his kidnappings. Even the most jolly or plain of locations can hide a seedy and grim underbelly. The devil is in plain sight, just like how Curtis's public face is that of an organ trader.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
Master, it is hopeless. It is hopeless. It is to understand thinking. Don't repeat the same thing. Did it forget any crack? It is not being happy, too. The mask is popular very much. Remember a masked attractiveness. The awareness is under her name.
Alter Ego might be the most beautiful level in the game, with its white wall buildings and scenic viewpoints of the Dominican Republic, making it just like its brother's restaurant Fukushima or Texas, but even more alienating as you're stepping out of the border for this target. While you were already a stranger in the previous locations, you feel that more so in the Dominican because the Smiths are tourists at this point. You are well and truly alone with no backups or lifelines, as even with the start of Encounter Part 2, Mills actually joined Garcian on the road trip to Curtis. The pure white blinds you as you're trying to explore the labyrinth of the Republic of Light and Shadow, itself a winding mess crawling with smiles. I think the only weak-looking levels in the game are Smile and Lion, as they don't do anything too varying from the previous stages, mostly amping up what came before them. That said, exploring Cobert has an eeriness to it that seeps in as you learn more about Amir, and the Hotel Union is a kaleidoscope null space where each floor starts making less and less sense the higher you climb. Why is there a checkerboard design for one of the halls, and why does this seemingly regular location feel completely disconnected, even from itself? This is merely the world design, as a lot of the visual flares of the menus to the characters have charm as well. The minimalist UI lets killer7 immerse you into its world, with the odd pop-ups like when you kill a smile or earn blood heightening the weirdness of the game. Who's going out of their way to tell me blood is all I need? These messages never get explained, yet add to the whole ambience of playing killer7, like how this game loves the CRT aesthetic. Garcian and Old Harmon, as opposed to the other Smiths, don't explode into a shower of blood when they change personas. Instead, they wave warp out of existence into someone else, kinda implying how disconnected they are from the other personalities. They get special treatment and aren't a member of the faceless crowd that the other personas are a part of. This isn't even getting into the Harmon rooms and how the TV is the means by which all is accomplished. Where does the blood room reside, seeing as you access it through the TV? There's a metric ton of content to talk about when it comes to killer7's visuals, as this might be one of the most recognizable casts in a video game. Each of the Smiths were carefully designed to a fault, allowing you to pick up clues and hints about their past or their personality from eyeballing them alone. Using Mask as the example, you can tell he's the muscle of the Smiths as he stands out around the second tallest of the personas, probably tallest if he didn't hunch over, but his inclusion of wrestling garb hints that he's a somewhat softie. The mask is the source of his powers, akin to how important a luchador's mask is within Lucha Libre, which ties into his death as he was killed when he wasn't wearing it. Take this and compare it to Old Harmon. From dress alone, you can guess that Harmon is much older than he seems, as if he's some mythological figure existing in the modern times. And even though he's strapped to a wheelchair, that doesn't discredit his capabilities, merely adding to his mystique and status as a legend. Each character has their own little quirks and tics that trying to go over all of them would make this video longer than it already is. For a somewhat shortened run-through, characters have separate animations for reloading while aiming or not. Each character has a different set of idle stances, counters, and down attacks that are wonderfully animated. Even the simple act of quick turning is different for everyone, as Khan rolls backwards while Kevin somersaults. It's hard to not just spooge about how much character the killer7 have, as even though the controls for the game are simplified, each of the Smiths have their own distinctions. Which brings me to the voice cast. Let's see if you know a few. Dwight Schultz, Greg Eagles, Tara Strong, Robin Atkin-Downs, Cam Clark, Michael Goh, Joe Lala, Jim Ward, Jennifer Hale, Alistair Duncan, Jack Eagle, Steve Bloom, Benicio Martinez, and I think you get the point I'm trying to make.
Say that all international disputes were resolved. This day marked the beginning of true peace for the entire world, for people of all races.
Ah, Garcian. How long has it been?
The Master is awake.
Garcian, relax.
As you wish, Master. There's an important message for you.
Ah, yes, I've felt it. An old friend is trying to bring down a country.
I will contact you.
If there are visitors for me, call.
As you wish.
Samantha, the lights.
As you wish, Master. It's time. Can I go now?
Yeah. Thanks.
See you tomorrow, then. Thanks. Mwah.
Almeida, I am a man with a plan. The people will come to me for salvation. I have a hunch that something's gonna happen. Take this Stacy concert going on right here. Something very bad is gonna happen here. You ever met the kind of people that come to these Stacy concerts? These dudes have got energy to spare. We're talking guys who beat off 4 times a day. This is an epicenter of energy, man. But this Stacy they love, she's an illusion. But in the new age, there's no fooling them. No, sir. They won't be tricked by illusions anymore. Oh my God. I can't hold back. Oh, God. Oh, I'm coming. Yeah! See, I told you. This is real. Now, Mr. Garcian Smith, I'm challenging you. I've created a new faith. I want you to find me. I'm waiting for you. So what do you say? If you don't find me, I won't have meaning. So I'll be waiting for you.
Please leave your message after the tone.
Hello, Mr. Smith. The election is drawing near. Have you decided on your vote? If you haven't, please let the Republic Party make the most of your precious vote. Thank you and have a nice day.
You're AB. Whoa, now that's cool.
Don't make me...
Jeez, you still are an ugly fella. How's it been, huh?
What the fuck are you looking at?
Sorry, pal, but this is the moment I've been waiting for. I have to do this or the anger inside will not go away.
I'm not a monster, it's only a mask.
Don't make me say it.
I feel my blood rushing through my body. Yes, this is it. The feeling, it's coming back to me. The sensation of killing. The doom and darkness. The dark streets. They're calling me to the ultimate ring.
If ever there was an all-star cast for a video game, this is the one with Dwight, Greg, and Joe the core of the voice performance. I'm pretty sure a lot of you will recognize Greg Eagles as the voice of Grim from Grim Adventures, as he uses the same vocal range that the old Reaper has, but he tones down the comedy stylings and accent to present a somewhat serious and cold cleaner that isn't perturbed by his job. Garcian seems down-to-earth if slightly aloof, hiding how insane his backstory is, and when he finally does uncover the truth, Greg gives a belter of a performance portraying Garcian as wavering on the side of Mindbreak. Dwight, meanwhile, gives old Harmon an imposing tone, rounding out what I said earlier about the character. There's a lot of authority within Harmon's vocal range, yet he never comes across as aggressive or outright demeaning. Again, it seems like he's an old god placed into the body of a human, and thus carries himself as such so as to not frighten or arouse suspicion. Basically, a kindly old man that could fuck you up if he wanted to. Joe Lala, RIP, meanwhile goes the opposite route, going full whack job as Kun Lan. He revels in the destruction he causes, his laugh the same one used by all the Heaven Smiles. Yet he can also be plotting and dial down his insanity to coerce people under his thumb. He doesn't approach Matsukin as his usual self, instead coming across as a man who has an interest. While these three are the trinity of Killer 7, that doesn't mean the other cast members don't get time to shine. You can clearly tell Cam Clark had a lot of fun as Andre Almeida. There's no way you can't when your opening line is talking about how many times guys beat off in a day. And then on a dime, he can play the Texas Bronco as highly sympathetic and afraid, like during the conversation Almeida has with the Smiths before the military intervenes. There's so many lines and phrases from the game that I can't help but latch onto, and I'm pretty sure there are a number of favorites you have as well. Wrapping this complete package with a bow is Masafumi Takada's OST, which might be the best one he's composed. Tackling a huge number of genres with gusto, there are some unbelievably great tracks within Killer 7. From the jaunty mix of Tex-Mex for Cloudman, the spacey sweet relief introducing you to the Celtic building, the reserved drum beats of the Save Room theme Multiple Personality, to the instant club classic Rave On, Takada put his heart and soul into the soundtrack. For a number of these songs, you only hear them briefly or for a single scene, like the lopsidedness of Russian Roulette, adding to the tension of the game between Garcian and Keen, or the sweet guitar riffs of Back to the Light accompanying young Harmon anytime he's on screen. And much like any good video game soundtrack, Killer 7's is one that I can listen to outside the game. Does that mean I've burned Rave onto a CD? Yes. Yes, it most certainly does, because it is my favorite track from the game, and you only get to hear around 10 seconds of it when the full version is 4 minutes 30. Killer 7 is a hybrid adventure game first-person shooter with hintings of RPG elements dashed right in. That's a mouthful, so let's start off smallish and cover difficulty, as Killer 7 has more than just the two listed at the beginning of a new playthrough. In total, there are technically 4 difficulties over the course of 3 game modes. Killer 7, the mode, has 2 of the 4 to choose from, Normal and Deadly. Normal, the selected difficulty I chose for this run-through, is the game's standard option. Enemies hit as they should, meaning they hit a bit hard but not too rough, and you are given enough hints by the varying remnant psyches to figure out puzzle solutions. Deadly makes Heaven Smile attacks a bit on the stronger side, around 2 or 3 strikes takes out a Smith except for Mask, while giving them more health, reviving Smiths a little more button mashy, and hints are generally absent. There is New Game Plus for Killer 7, and you can replay stages, more on this later, but the game's New Game Plus is a little bit different. Upon booting up the game after beating it, the title changes to Killer 8, which adds the additional character of young Harmon to the Smith roster, and is who you want to play as, seeing as Heaven Smiles can one-shot any Smith that isn't Mask or Harmon, the two taking 2 hits to down. Makes sense seeing as you're playing on Bloodbath, removing any type of hint from the game, including map icons except for Harmon rooms, permanently hiding all regular Heaven Smile critical spots, though those like the backside and spiral still have visible weak spots, and you can still critical regular smiles, it's just harder, increasing their health to an insane degree, and reviving a Smith becomes as painful as playing Mario Party 1 on a Nintendo 64 controller. Dying in Killer 8 is quite embarrassing. Finishing Killer 8 unlocks Hopper 7, a remixed version of Target 00 Angel, where standard Heaven Smiles are replaced with Hoppermen that go down in one shot. The other smiles introduced in Angel are unaffected, and Hopper 7 is mostly akin to Normal from the Killer 7 mode. Previously mentioned, I stuck to Normal and was met with a fairly normal playing experience. Nothing too strenuous or what I would deem unfair, though there are some spikes in difficulty and a few annoying elements at play. Killer 7's level structure is mission-based, there being a total of 7 quote-unquote targets for the Smiths to take care of. Simple enough, selecting a target takes you to that mission, each level self-contained on the gameplay front. Fairly obvious. You only unlock new targets after beating previous ones, though structure for a target lies in two groups: single and double axe. Targets Angel, Cloudman, and Lion are all one level. You stay in a centralized location. Targets Sunset, Encounter, Alter Ego, technically, and Smile take you to 2 with a little interlude between both segments. Besides Angel and Lion, which dump you right into the main area for the levels, each target begins with Garcian enjoying breakfast, lunch, or dinner in his trailer, only for him to be sent a contract through Mills, requiring him to converse with Harmon before he leaves his trailer and enters the stage proper. I feel like since I'm in this safe zone at Garcian's trailer, I'll do 2 or 4 controls. Since I played the Steam version, there is an option for keyboard and mouse or controller, me opting for the latter, and I will break down how Killer7 works using this scheme. The control stick in Killer7 doesn't handle movement for the most part. Instead, holding the A button moves your chosen smith forward, with B turning them around. You cannot backpedal in the game, so if you want to go backwards, you have to hit B to turn around or hit B while holding A for a quick turn, with each smith having a specific speed at which they quick turn. Kevin, for example, has the fastest quick turn, somersaulting in the opposite direction, while old Harmon doesn't have a quick turn at all. Despite my evaluations of this, quick turning isn't too important unless attempting to dodge a Heaven Smile. That's all for general movement, bringing me back to the control stick. It directs you down which path you want to go. What I didn't mention at the top is that Killer7 is on rails. Levels are made up of paths that you can jump on and off of. That means the stages aren't fully explorable in the traditional sense of the word, as you can't leave the rails. When an alternating path does come up that you can hop onto, a real-time selection menu pops up, with pointing the control stick in the direction of the path you want to follow, switching you over to that track. To tackle level progression a bit, you'll have to jump between tracks to solve puzzles or collect items, so Killer7 isn't a fully linear affair. Stages can be big at times, with pathways either leading back into themselves, connecting to isolated areas of the map, or having a few pathways lead to the same area. There is a map feature in the game, but I didn't use it as I've played Killer7 enough times to know where things are, though the map does list out where mandatory items and save rooms are. Before that, though, you'll probably be hearing the laughter of Heaven Smiles wherever you go, bringing us to combat. Heaven Smiles are a wily bunch in that they always spawn invisible. The laugh track is your cue to stop moving and scan around the area to see anything egregious in the environment. Usually in the form of a walking outline, though Heaven Smiles can take a number of shapes. When you see that a Heaven Smile is in a room, as Heaven Smiles do have an awareness radius that if you're standing out of, they won't start beelining to you. This is dependent on Heaven Smile type. Holding down right trigger will pull out your chosen smith's chosen armament, allowing you to perform a few actions. The main two are scanning and shooting. While anyone with working eyeballs can see that a cloaked figure is shambling towards them, a Heaven Smile's invisibility acts as a protective layer for them. You cannot damage a Heaven Smile if you haven't scanned them, and in many cases, shooting an invisible smile heightens their aggression, causing them to pick up their pace from slow walk to mild jog. Scanning is still possible on an angry smile, you only have less time to kill them. Shooting is shooting. Guns and other such projectiles are pretty self-explanatory. Kidding aside, shooting has a bit more nitty-gritty than that, mostly because of the interplay between the smiths and the smiles. First off, whenever a normal smile is scanned, normal here fulfilling the role of describing most bipedal and human-looking smiles, a glowing yellow spot will shine on one of their body parts, usually arms, legs, or head. This is a weak spot. Hitting it instantly kills a smile. Sure, for a majority, you can gun them down without needing to hit the spot, but you lose out on two things: blood and combo streak. Blood is the lifeblood of the smiths. You need it, and smiles have it. Hurting smiles and blowing off their limbs always awards a smidgen of blood, but the big bank is in critical hits. Whenever a smile dies via the Chicago handshake, it evaporates into colorful sparkles. Hitting a weak spot causes them to erupt into a blood geyser and kicks off a combo with the longer it going on for, awarding more blood. Every smile is subject to this -1 and is how you get lots of blood, but killing a smile without hitting a weak spot resets your combo back to 0. While it seems like I've been referring to blood as a singular, it's a hidden plural as there are 2 types dripped from smiles: thick and thin. Both are of equal importance, but in 2 categories. Thick blood is how you level up the smiths. Max carrying capacity is 1,000 liters, and you have to turn it into serum at a Harmon's room to use it. Thin blood facilitates smith abilities and is used for healing. I'll cover abilities in a bit, so onto healing. Killer 7's UI is minimal except for the compass, which can help you figure out where you are as every path lists its cardinal direction, and the eye inside, which represents your health. Fully open means you are topped up with how close it is to closing, representing how near you are to personality death. Side note, it also tells you if you have any thin blood, with the iris red confirming that you do, with it blue telling that you don't. When you're damaged, you can hit the pause button to pull up the menu, allowing you to change personas, look at pigeon memos and change rings, and select healing to use a vial of thin blood to heal. The smiths can hold a total of 20 thin blood vials, and trust me, you'll never run out as long as you're halfway decent with aiming and shooting. Back to that, you can cycle and lock onto targets through scanning, hitting the B button and hitting directions on the D-pad, but I didn't really take advantage of this style of locking on because you want to hit weak spots, not center of mass. Lying is the only stage I saw any use of this, as Amir lacks the vision ring, but he can still pick out smiles a mile away. Since they are still the topic, Heaven Smiles come in 24 varieties like a party pack, not even including colored versions like the Corn Pop Smile because he explodes into Corn Pops, or the 2 versions of the Micro Smile. That said, besides a few defensive or movement options, most hominid smiles act and attack the same. The basic Heaven Smile, Speed, Camilla, Another, Poison, Mithril, and Roller all spawn a weak spot on their body for you to shoot at. Out of those listed, Poison has to be killed via a critical hit, otherwise it keeps getting back up. Mithril wears armor on its body that you have to shoot around, and Speed, Another, and Roller all have varying mobility capabilities that the regular smiles don't. Heaven Smiles come in walkers and runners, which is the only detail to point at. Camilla are the metal slimes or cactars, as they drop a hospital load of blood, but they run away when they notice you. While human in shape, Bombheads, Phantoms, Olmeda, and Giants split off from the main group as their weak spots are always the same, and they have separate methods of attack. Bombheads, as their name implies, don't like headshots, though their bomb casing opens and closes every few moments, exposing their head. Hitting the casing causes an explosion that takes out everything around it. Phantoms always have an exaggerated limb as their critical zone, with landing a hit anywhere else ending up with them instantly zooming towards your location like you turned it on and detonating in your face. This isn't instant kill territory like Bombheads, but taking damage isn't ideal. Giants have Mono Eye Syndrome designating their weak spot, but it opens and closes as a defensive measure. These ones fall on you when close, but it's slower than Continental Drift, meaning the best way to kill Giants is by letting them tumble, as you can run away, and when a smile explodes, it doesn't reset your combo, unlike unloading into them. Olmedas are barely worth mentioning, as they don't attack unless provoked, respawn constantly, and their weak spot is center of mass. You kill dozens of Olmedas in Cloudman as they drop coins needed for a puzzle. Now we enter the realm away from human-shaped smiles, starting with Micro. Small in size and emanating a high-pitched tone, Micros cannot damage you, but their explosions flashbang the screen for a set period of time. 2 types, red Micros give good amounts of blood, while yellow Micros awaken all the smiths that haven't been. There's usually a yellow Micro near the beginning of each stage, though they don't respawn, so aim your shots well or use mask, as it doesn't matter how they're killed. Duplicators and Mother Smiles birth out eggs that spawn Heaven Smiles, both needing their cores destroyed via Coyote or Dan in their charge shots. Mothers can be gunned down regularly, though duplicators need their cores destroyed by the above. Cores come in yellow or red, with red needing Dan's collateral shot to destroy. Yellow can be handled by Coyote's charge shot. Or if you want to take care of them in a brisk manner, Mask in his 3rd and 4th outfits can take out all the cores with a maxed out charge shot. Duplicators explode and blind like micros, but a neat little workaround is that if you pause, the effect will still happen and go away without putting you into danger as you're in the pause menu. One of those tips I know about killer7. Spirals are ball-shaped smiles with the most obvious weak point that if you can't kill one, I don't know, pick up a hobby separate from this one. May I suggest writing? Backsides are another literal smile as you have to shoot their arm fins to spin them around to hit their weak spot. Or, once again, use Mask to take care of them as a level 2 charge shot from him is an insta-crit on backsides. I keep bringing Mask up, so let's go through the Protector series. Protector, Z, and Double Z. Regular shot, 1 vial charge shot, and 2 vial charge shot for Mask respectively. Broken smiles might as well be called frownies, as killing them via their weak spot is pretty improbable, as critical lock-on doesn't work and they zigzag all over the damn place, making training a gun on them difficult. Here's a heads up. Use Mask. Last of the normal smiles are Laser, one of the only ranged smiles that fires off before dying. The laser does do a bit of damage and will kill you outright during the battle against their boss version, but they can be tricked into firing off and a weak spot does spawn on them. Yeah, smiles can come in boss versions usually after you find all the soul shells needed for the Vinculum Gate, with Timer and Galactic Tomahawk isolated to these encounters. Timer has a lot of weak spots while GT fires missiles. Poke them out in the former and gun down the latter. Soul shells are one of the few collectibles in the game needed to progress within a stage, the other two the odd engravings and the element rings. Puzzles involving the first item usually need the last two to solve, like in Encounter 1 where you need an odd engraving to activate the park lights, so you can spawn a soul shell tied to a balloon so you can blow it down with the wind ring. Acquiring an odd engraving might be its own mini puzzle using a ring, but there are a number of out-and-out logic and math puzzles to solve, with Sunset 2 chock full of them. And that usually makes up stage progression. Solving puzzles by using a ring or smith ability to get odd engravings, level-specific items like the Olmeda figures or color swatches, or shells so you can continue on ahead. For the most part, rings are given to you as they are needed, though 2 are optional. Stamina and Power. One raises defense, the other offense when equipped. Since Smith health can't be manipulated or increased, Stamina is the ring to equip when you aren't solving puzzles. Dotting the maps as you explore them are the Remnant Psyches, who either provide puzzle hints like a Wazuru, Kakazaru, Yoon-hoon, or the Cult member, provide items like a Wazuru, Travis Bell, or Susie Sumner, or just a chat like a Wazuru, Travis Bell, or Kess Bloody Sunday. For a GIMP, a Wazuru sure does perform a lot of functions. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to, but you miss out on some background elements for targets for the ones that are optional, as these are just the mainstay Psyches, and Kess will intrude on you regardless as he warns you of new smiles. Outside of them, there are 2 other NPCs connected to the Smiths, and they are Samantha and the Butler. They only show up in Harmon rooms as you have to save through them, though if Samantha isn't in her maid garb when you enter a Harmon's room, and the room itself isn't a black void, you can't save. You can still upgrade and awaken Smiths, however. When you begin a stage, specific Smiths are awake from the start, with you needing to kill a set amount of smiles to awaken the others within a Harmon's room. That's why micros are important. Regardless if you can save or not, you can always turn thick blood into serum at any Harmon's room, though each level has a limit on how much serum you can make. Once you reach it, the blood machine goes out of order for the rest of the stage or half. As for the 2-parter levels, the machine gets fixed in between the interlude. Serum is needed to upgrade Smiths, with higher levels of skills needing more serum. Most of the Smiths have these categories to upgrade: Power, Speed, Waver, and Critical. Power increases damage, Speed affects reloading, fire rate, and movement, Waver reduces recoil, and Critical embiggens the weak spot on Heaven Smiles. Kevin lacks Waver as he uses throwing knives, so instead he gets Invisibility, which allows him to stay invisible for longer. Mask can't crit regular smiles, so he gets range, making the splash damage on his grenades bigger. Leveling up skills might also see an ability get unlocked like counter, down attack, or critical lock-on. By hitting X when a smile is right close to you, you'll counter their attack and instantly kill the smile. This only works on humanoid smiles and doesn't award blood and also ends your combo. Down attack is the same thing, but hitting A when a smile is crawling towards you. Critical lock-on is the best ability in the game. I Wonder why? Take note that it only works if the smile has a normal weak spot, so no locking onto broken smiles. Now we can get to the main event, the Smiths. Technically, there are 9 Smiths within Killer 7, but 2 are used almost exclusively in story scenarios. As such, Old Harmon Smith is one of them. Rocking an anti-material rifle, a wheelchair, and infinite health, Old Harmon is only used in story sequences and thus there isn't anything to cover. Second in command is Garcian Smith. While his health is above average, his silenced pistol leaves much to be desired. A small clip with poor range and accuracy makes it hard to kill Smiles, despite its fast reload, and he can only equip the vision ring and can't change into any other persona except at a Harmon's room. That said, you almost never play as Garcian unless you have to, which you do if a Smith dies. Dying as anyone besides Garcian doesn't lead to a game over. Instead, you spawn at the nearest Harmon's room as Garcian and must make your way back to where the persona died to recover their head and revive them with a button-mashing minigame. If Garcian dies, it's game over, so be careful. Young Harmon Smith is only playable in Killer 8 and is basically the main character of that mode. Enough health to survive a blast on Bloodbath, and armed with a Tommy gun, Young Harmon rarely has to reload and deals enough damage to wipe out Smiles for days, only hamstrung by his slower movement speed. All 3, by the way, can't be upgraded unlike the other Smiths, though they do have stats at certain levels, as Young Harmon basically has no recoil. First up for the Smiths that you'll mostly play as is Dan Smith. Armed with a 6-shooter that evolves into the 12-shot demon gun, Dan is pretty solid all around. Good damage, good speed, good reload, his ability, the collateral shot, instant kills most Smiles at the cost of 3 blood vials, jack of all trades, which is the worst thing about him. He doesn't excel in anything, and his gimmick gets overtaken by Mask or Coyote. Terrible segue, Coyote is like Dan, only hitting slightly harder though dealing with more recoil. He too has a revolver, but fires it in an odd stance that makes landing a blow with it harder than it needs to be. His charge shot only needs 1 vial to destroy yellow cores, and his reload is pretty quick, but Coyote's mostly the puzzle guy. He can unlock padlocks and jump really high with a blood vial. Kevin is the starter crutch when first playing Killer 7. Because he uses knives, he has no recoil to compensate for, never has to reload, and Kevin chucks them pretty fast. He also gets a few additional attacks like a charge shot, the shine sparking, and enemy slow, making him a solid combat choice. His invisibility further adds to his usefulness, able to dodge triple arms and ignore Smiles. Kevin's only downside is damage, which can be augmented. Kaede is the sniper for the team. Armed with a scoped deagle, she can snipe Smiles from far away provided she can make them visible. However, she lacks in both health and speed, sharing lowest health amount for the Smiths and having the worst reload in the game. Kaede bumbles a clip in when reloading while aiming, so always reload, done by flicking right stick, outside of aiming. Her fire rate and recoil can be iffy as well. Past her combat ability, Kaede can remove barriers and absorb blood to reach new areas or find puzzle solutions. What makes her one of the best members is that she gets critical lock on early, at level 4 as opposed to level 5, making her an ideal candidate to pump serum into before everyone else. Along that same line, Khan is completely dedicated to combat. With 2 Glocks, Khan's fire rate, DPS, and reload is the best of the non-Killer 8 syndicate, but his accuracy and recoil can take some time getting used to. He's flimsy to a fault as well, 2 explosions taking him out without the stamina ring bumping it up to 3. His ability to run fast never sees any mandatory usage either, only useful for cutting down on long corridors. However, because he's the kid of the group, he can fit into tight spaces and his blindness enhanced his hearing, able to track noises like gusts of wind or the guitarist's song. Kevin, Kaede, and Khan are the 3 Smiths I would tell you to use for combat. Rounding out the gang, Mask is the muscle. Lots of health, lots of damage, but his grenades can't crit, and he starts off pretty slow, with his reload taking way too long for him to be effective in any gunfight. But not only does he get the blood room upgrades, Mask gets wrestling gear which further bolsters his abilities, particularly reload and damage. By the time he becomes the strongest at the end of Alter Ego, he never has to reload. Smiths can be changed on the fly during gameplay by pausing, but only if they've been awakened and aren't dead. They also upgrade separately, meaning you can replay levels to farm blood if need be. Bosses are a bit weird in Killer 7, as outside of the Vinculum Gate showdowns, they're kinda like gimmick battles. Like, the duel against Curtis is more a minigame than anything else, and the struggle against the Handsome Men is unlosable. Only Ayami would be considered a traditional boss, and you mostly shoot at her until she dies. There's no strategy to really bring up here, leaving me with kinda a wet finish to this segment. It says a lot that I think every level does something cool within Killer 7, so let me just run them down. Angel is a prime introductory level for a game like this, as it drops you right in, no explanation, nothing. It's like you're stepping into a day in the life of the Killer 7, so while everything they do seems normal to them, you're left in the lurch. As soon as Garcian steps through the doors of the Celtic building, all bets are off as the game drops the bombshell that whoever the Smith Syndicate are, they sure aren't normal. People don't just spontaneously change into someone else. While the Celtic building doesn't do anything too taxing on the gameplay front, it throws the kitchen sink at you in terms of presenting what this game is about. Right as you're recovering from Garcian turning into Dan because the former was spotted by a CCTV camera, you're seeing a good few people getting splattered by Heaven Smile, showing off how effective the hidden killers are at dispatching anything in their way. You learn the graveness of the enemy you're facing off against once you see a woman's backside completely stripped away. If that doesn't provide the perfect hook, in steps the remnant psyches and their own idiosyncrasies. One tiny smidgen detail about the psyches that I failed to mention in the presentation is that they have original VO based on what regional version of Killer 7 you're playing, as the US got a raspy, highly distorted whisper core, while Japan got straight text-to-speech word salad. Do some changing of folder names and bam, you get English text with the Japanese text-to-speech for the Psyche's VO, which I think adds an even thicker layer of absurdity. I expected Ghost to speak in some sort of unlistenable mumble mush, but having one talk in a monotone imposes an even creepier air around the past Killer 7 hits. Only adding to this is that, for the most part, the Psyches are a jovial bunch, even what they are saying is either macabre with a capital M, or so far out left field that I don't think there's a player there. You know you're knee-deep in the weirdness when the Gimp and Perpetual Jokester are the two sanest psyches, as Wazru and Travis for the most part are pretty normal dudes, especially in comparison to Susie and Kess. I don't know which of the two is the more outlandish, as both are serial killers and they lie in two distinct molds. Susie screams out jilted lover and wildfire, with most of her dialogue upbeat and sprinkled with emoticons, positively pointing out how vicious she is. In the same breath as she's describing how much she likes chocolate sundaes on a hot summer day, she's droning on and on about cutting a guy's Johnson off like that's exactly how conversations flow and isn't, you know, a terrible crime. She's an unrepentant murderer whose tone and general dialect deflect from that nature. Also, she's just ahead. No explanation, no lampshading, she's the only remnant that doesn't have a full body, begging the question what actually happened to her when the Smiths caught up. All the remnants are previous targets of the Syndicate, so it makes you ponder how or why they became targets. Because she's a stump, Killer 7 has a lot of fun placing Susie into many hilarious situations, as her introduction is you pulling her out of a tumbling dryer. I say pull out, but you actually leave her in, which is what happens to her after every round of talking to her. In Sunset, you find her in a box, and after getting the wind ring from her, you pull the box flap back up so she's once again obscured. Kess, meanwhile, is about as childish as Khan, having a multitude of moments where he acts giddy like a schoolgirl, but they don't call him Bloody Sunday for no reason. What makes him more peculiar is that we never get any allusions to his misdeeds besides from Johnny Gagnon. Like a good few factors in the story, Kess isn't fully explained, letting you wonder what he actually committed. And with how he looks, gaunt face covered in blood and white soulless pupils staring off into oblivion, you know he did some freaky geeky shit. Kess scares the hell out of me, and I'm a fearless blob. Rounding out the psyches is Johnny Gagnon, the kinda unsung hero of the side characters, as most of his development is done through text by his carrier pigeons. Pigeons all named after Bond girls. James Bond girls to be exact, which isn't even the strangest part about Johnny. He's apparently a well-known criminal that somehow tracks down the Smith Syndicate for a mirror, yet he can't seem to get the bloody Heartland to wire him money. In a way, he's a cornball and goof, so if it weren't for his skills and knack for tracking down dangerous persons and learning about them, you'd swear Amir was playing him for a fool. Gagnon's increasing anger over not getting paid is one of the quaintest side stories in Killer 7, as it can basically be summarized as Johnny getting so fed up over not being paid $25 that he inadvertently puts himself into the line of fire by wanting to track down Amir, leading to his death at the hands of Harmon. Which begs the question, who or what is sending these pigeons with Johnny's messages on them? Are they themselves the representation for Johnny as a remnant? Whoever the Smiths kill winds up as a remnant with the stronger personalities hanging on as their own entity instead of disappearing. If Susie is only a head, who's to say that Johnny can't be a collection of pigeons? It wouldn't be the oddest thing to happen in Killer 7, as the boss of Angel is the eponymous figure wearing one of those Kigurumi masks, which isn't the only instance of a character with one in the story. Angel is the first taste you get of the bosses in the game, setting the stage for some real bizarre, in the good way, battles, as there aren't a lot of traditional boss fights within Killer 7. Angel is about as standard as it gets within the game, saying a whole lot about the other bosses in question. If shooting out her wings with Harmon only to play Ring Around the Rosie while sniping back faces is normal within the realm of the game, that sets you up to expect the unexpected for the following encounters. Visually speaking, Sunset is one of my favorite levels next to Cloudman and Alter Ego because it's all about aesthetics. Being the first two-parter, Sunset braces you for how expansive some of the targets can be, putting to scale how important the duty of the Killer 7 is. It feels like you're actually having to travel around to get the drop on people, and it helps to give each level its own feel. It makes the world seem big as the politics that are taking place within it, like what the Killer 7 are doing matters and has impact. Speaking of, Sunset loves its callbacks to feudal Japan and much of the iconography associated with the time period. Restaurant Fukushima is an anachronism in the world of Killer 7. It looks straight ripped from Seven Samurai or any classical Japanese movie. This has its basis in abstraction, as it's shorthand for describing how traditionalist Japan's government is within the story. They do things according to code, further seen with Matsukin and his superiors in the second half of the chapter. There's a real respect your elders vibe seeping from Sunset, a cultural norm in Japan compared to America, where we don't put so much importance on our elders. We're mostly about our young and building the future for them, one of the many culture clashes depicted within Killer 7, as you could describe America wanting to be one giant superpower as the country wanting to build a better tomorrow for those that will have to live in it. Of course, that means beating down anyone that steps into the way of that dream regardless of who they are. Sunset is the window into the politics of Killer 7 and how both sides are willing to sink to achieve their goals. How honor and loyalty means a hill of beans in the face of annihilation or progress, akin to how the samurai died out come modern ingenuity and discovery. What purpose does loyalty or even honor serve if it only brings you a grave? Fukushima figured that out the hard way with Julia gunning him down without blinking an eye. This whole philosophy applies to the back half of Sunset as well, the Kaku building a one-to-one modern version of a gambling den. You get heavy Yakuza vibes, as in the old days for the organization, they handled a lot of business within gambling dens. It once again captures how connected to their past Japan is and how it isn't working out for them, seeing as the island gets bombed as the sun sets. A little creative wordplay there from Suda that I will make sure goes appreciated, and how you can view symbolically that Matsukin's higher-ups are the last gasp of Japan's tradition. While on the gameplay front, Sunset isn't too crazy, the three bosses for the level are a varied bunch, with Julia a damage race, DePaul a timing fight, and the superiors a normal boss battle. Two of those are wild departures from the precedent of Angel, with only the final fight of Sunset sticking to that mold. Like, in all aspects of Killer 7, it wants to experiment with how bosses are conducted. Cloudman is one of the peaks of Killer 7 for me, as I love practically everything surrounding it. I've already covered the visual front for the levels, so gameplay-wise, it has my favorite puzzle in the shape of collecting the Olmeda figures. Not only is it such an odd solution to the puzzle, they milk the gimmick by having you search around for a rare one, show Andre's photo to the pharmacy to get another, and play gachapon for the rest. Around Cloudman is when the Smiths really start getting into their groove, as you start facing off against multiple Heaven Smile types together. The lead up to the post office has a few hominoid smiles backed up by backsides, so you have to judge distance and aggro range so that you don't wind up in a sticky situation. Getting caught as Mask against a human-shaped smile is a bit of a downer, innit? Cloudman has the best boss in my opinion, as it takes full advantage of the movement and rail system to deliver a somewhat threatening and confusing bout against Andre. While the Cloudman can hit you from range with his tendrils, bumping into him is an instant death, with the scariest part being that when you re-enter the boss arena, he's already moving about. The winding corridors of the ambulances and their blind corners makes it easy to accidentally run into Andre, which in of itself is its own scare. As if to mirror this, Andre only goes down in one hit too, the challenge is getting behind him. While I've gone on about Encounter's theming, Curtis might be my favorite villain within the game, as he is unabashedly evil. When he does die and becomes a remnant, Curtis mentions how he wanted to get caught, but that doesn't undercut his scene with Pedro or his storming of the immigration office. If ever there was an introduction to a character, Curtis's classy spritz of wine before he guns down a prostitute in his limo says everything you need to know about him. He puts on airs of being a gentleman with his fondness of classical music and refined taste, but he's just a creep drunk on power and isn't anyone special. As Harmon says, he's a punk with a gun. Encounter also marks when the boss fights become their weirdest, as the two showdowns with Ayame are surely mechanically standard, but Ayame is a curious and eccentric character to say the least. Why does she wear a Kigurumi mask? Do you want to fully know what Curtis is into? Thought so. Stranger still, Curtis is a dual fight and is the precursor for the Handsome Men bout, just way more personal, and with the odd stipulation of the pigeon acting as the countdown. It's an easy fight, as once you know that the pigeon flies off when it coos, you can't be tricked, but it's still a memorable moment as it's practically a rival fight. Encounter Part 1 has my favorite puzzle solution in the entire game, as when running through the fun house, you have to do a bit of target shooting against some mice that pop out of a block of cheese. Your instinct tells you to switch to Kaede because sniping would be useful here, but no. Switch to Mask, blow up the cheese. You hit all the rats, didn't you? I will say, though, that the encounter with Curtis gets upstaged by the Handsome Men battle, which is the selling point of Alter Ego. Not every day you get to face off against Super Sentai heroes in what amounts to an 8-on-8 loser leaves town match. The Dominican was already beautiful enough, Killer 7, you didn't have to spoil me this far. For real, I still don't know all the mechanics when it comes to the Handsome Men battle, as while you can't lose, you can win during the duels, but only if you hit specific body parts. I know that for Harmon, you only have to shoot his copy, but you can knock out Blue as Dan with a headshot and Gold as Coyote with a leg shot. I would assume that would mean you can win all the fights up to Pink where the duel auto ends, but I've never found out how to take out the rest of the Handsome Men if it even is possible. Smile and Lion serve as the perfect capstones to Killer 7, both carrying heavy revelations for the plot and resolving Amir's character arc. Of the two, I do drift more towards Smile, mostly because it is an actual stage as opposed to an extended epilogue, and what a finale it is. Union Hotel is a proving ground for how you've leveled up the Smiths, as you will need to utilize all their combat abilities to climb the floors. Knowing all the little details pertaining to the Smiths' attacks helps out a lot in the hotel, as why use Dan to collateral shot when Mask's full charge shot knocks out duplicators instantly. The revisit to Union as Garcian has the most emotional impact in the entire story, from finding out how the original versions of this Smith Syndicate met their end at the hands of Amir, to Garcian finally killing his past and becoming free. The Hotel Union is a great send-off for the Garcian persona. And before moving to Coburn, the Union has a cameo from a previous Suda 51 character in the shape of Flower Sin and Rain's Edo McAllister. Before that even, Alter Ego has Moonlight Syndrome's Mithra make an appearance. Why? I don't know, but it's cool that all these stories are taking place in the same universe, an idea that Suda would continue with No More Heroes, as in Travis Strikes Back, Dan Smith has a cameo in the opener. Coburn might not be the hardest stage, but searching for the cassette tapes will always be a chilling experience as we learn exactly the circumstances of Amir through Holbert. It's a lot like finding an apocalypse log, as we know the agent doesn't make it after a run-in with the bloody Heartland. Greg Nightmare, meanwhile, is the definition for Killer 7's bosses. There isn't quite like anything I fought in other games that matches up to Greg Nightmare. In what other boss do you attempt to blow the pants off a hanging dead guy before he shoots you with the golden gun, and then having to watch helplessly as those precious personas you leveled up unceremoniously get exploded by the black smiles gets me every time. There's no singular point in Killer 7 that stands out to me, as the entire game never pulls off the gas. One minute you're doing a routine hit, except for the fact that you know nothing about how this world works, only to be thrown into the deep end as you stare down this season of Super Sentai. I haven't even gotten to the alternate animations for some stages, as Sunset and Alter Ego have cutscenes animated by Studio Zebek, who handled the likes of Zoid's Chaotic Century and the Rockman.exe anime, while Digital Frontier, who worked on Pokemon Heroes and a few of those Resident Evil CGI movies, had the reins for the Cloudman cutscenes. While the scenes by Studio Zebek are fairly standard in the terms of looking like anime, Digital Frontier went with a more experimental style that seems like it was ripped from a music video. The high contrast focus on black and white with red acting as the only highlight is a visual statement, and one that I fully enjoy. More games need to follow what was set out by Killer 7, as it fully understands what presentation is. It's not about looking the best or matching real life, but creating an identity, nay a persona, that lasts the ages and hits what it's aiming for incongruent with the story's tone. I haven't even gone on about the way that cutscenes are shot and blocked with utmost care. Back to Curtis's introduction, it's shot entirely in the first person, creating a reverse horror effect as you're in the monster's POV. You can't escape what horrible things you're about to see. You can tell how heavily Suda borrowed from films with how the cutscenes are directed, spicing them up with the usual style that his games are known for. About the weakest part of Killer 7 is the gameplay, but not that it's bad. However, there are some qualms I have with it. Probably the weakest aspect of Killer 7 itself is the gameplay, but not in the overall loop sense. The blending of adventure-style design and the first-person shooting works, it's just that it falters with the characters. Best example, how much of my footage is either Khan, Kevin, or Kaede as my chosen Smith? The balancing of the Smith Alliance is all over the place, leading to some members quietly sitting on their hands until they're needed before being shunted back off onto the bench. These three are the accomplished combatants of the Smiths, seen as all their unique attributes suit well for combat. Khan's just an all-around great fighter. Kaede's sniping can pick off threats from far away, both get critical lock-on early, and Kevin never has to deal with waver as his knives don't recoil. That means Dan, Coyote, and Mask are only useful in select roles. It's a toss-up between who's the most useless compared to our revolver duo, as Dan's collateral shot is only needed in 2 instances on normal, as yellow weak spots on Mother and Duplicator Smiles can be shot out by Coyote's charge shot, and Mask's able to instantly defeat a dupe after he gets his 3rd outfit, but compared to Coyote, Dan doesn't have horrendous recoil. Landing a critical hit on any smile as Coyote is among one of the more frustrating things within Killer 7 because of how repulsive his waver and recoil are, easily throwing off your aim, but his charge shot only needs one vial of thin blood to use and can easily punch out the yellow weak spots on a duplicator smile, with 2 needed to stop Mother Smile if you don't decide to just gun it down. Coyote mostly serves as a puzzle guy, unlocking padlocks and accessing higher areas, so I'm split down the middle for the two. Coyote has a much higher frequency of use compared to Dan, but Dan is the better shot and receives the Demon Gun, granting him 12 shots before reloading. The learned abilities also fall into this 1/2 dozen or the other issue, as Coyote's leg lock can be useful to hit weak spots on those limbs, but you're just as likely to blow it off, leaving you with a broken combo streak. Headlock on for Dan is great for bomb head smiles and not much else. And this doesn't even bring in the other half of the problem, which is why settle for either when I can pick Khan, Kaede, or Kevin? Unless the two are your favorite of the bunch, on a gameplay front, there is no reason to go with Dan or Coyote unless a level has just started and you have to awaken the other Smiths. Mask, meanwhile, is the worst member for 3 whole missions, as while he has damage output to spare, he can't critical hit regular smiles, nor does he build combo or gain blood from killing them. The reload on his base form is just slightly above Kaede's aiming reload, so you'll get about 1 shot and then be forced to back up because a smile has gotten too close for comfort. Killer 7 picks on you for choosing Mask in the early game, but unlike Dan or Coyote, at least Mask develops a niche for himself over the course of the back half as he gets the Protector Smiles, can crit backsides with charge shots, and when you have maxed out Serum for a stage, Mask makes enemies trivial, plus he becomes the dedicated dupe killer after Alter Ego, as I've mentioned earlier, truly giving Dan and Coyote nothing to do except handle puzzle elements. Which is a tad shame since, out of the lineup, Dan and Coyote are 2 members of the gang that have personality. This is a flip side issue, as for as fun as I find it to play as Kevin or Kaede, they are the blandest of the Fellowship, which again sucks as they both look cool and distinct in their own right. Kevin gets shackled up with a mute gimmick, and he never lets slip a peep except during his death at the Union Hotel. On one hand, this can lead to a bit of intrigue as it surrounds his character with mystique. On the other, I'm not so much latching onto him because he's an overall interesting and fully rounded character. He's another mystery whose personality is secondary to the bizarreness surrounding him. It's a lot like the Tyranids, where they aren't fleshed out and most information on them comes from battle books or Gene Stealer stories, except here it's condensed to one person who has to share the spotlight with 7 other people who are able to emote. Kevin has no story beats to speak of for himself, only sharing the death at the Hotel Union with his fellow gang members. I can pick out why he has the powers that he does, but he's a blank slate. The unique circumstances around a character doesn't cover the lack of one, which is what I think annoys me about Kaede the most. She has the same problem as Kevin, only worse as she's giving fuck all in terms of character, despite the fact that she can speak unlike Four Eyes. A major aspect of Killer 7 is never giving you the full picture, allowing you to feel it out for yourself, which works well in the case of Dan or Coyote, as the breadcrumbs given do paint a substantial picture. Yet with Kevin and Kaede, they're never given a chance to even do that, as their moments in the story are so brief and they have very little character interaction. Like, Khan's whole geeking out over the handsome men really gets across how young he is compared to the other Smiths, and how against the rest, he's always bright and chipper. You get the feeling that he's the class clown of the syndicate, not taking anything seriously. And that scene I'm speaking of is a tiny, minuscule moment near the end of the game, yet it does well to characterize who Khan is. I can surmise that Dan is the hot-headed and brash second-in-command for the Smiths, while Coyote is closer to his title than how he comes across. Coyote reeks of bluster and lacks the capability to back up his words, unlike Dan. Yet with Kevin and Kaede, all I have laid out in front of me is that Kevin was probably good at disguise, and Kaede was probably the Black Widow for the Smiths, as her TV dialogue mentions men never noticing something. I don't know how much of what I covered for the personalities of the characters is an issue pertaining to just me, but I like my somewhat out of left field characters to be more than just what they're able to do when they're considered the center focus. I guess if I had a better way to relate this complaint, it's kind of like Eden or Alma from MGQ, where they are central to the major plot but don't get a lot of time to shine. Moving away from this take it or leave it issue, one of the more annoying flaws of the game pops up when actually going for critical hits, as the inaccuracy of the smiths can be hard to judge. This is a case-by-case basis, but you'll mostly blow off legs and arms when going for those weak spots as you swear you hit the glowing yellow spot. Even with critical lock-on, you're still at the mercy of the base accuracy of whatever smith you've chosen. I've landed shots from far away with con in the same spray that I've accidentally lobbed off a limb. It can be inconsistent, and what doesn't help is that critical spots can sometimes disappear. I don't get what's with Kaede's scope, but it has this strange tendency for graphical buffoonery, occasionally causing the weak spot to phase out. If you still hit the general area, it'll cause an instant kill, so it's not like it removes the spot, merely the visual notification for it. Since I'm on the topic of smiles, Broken, Giant, Poison, and Bombhead are probably the most threatening of the enemies, though mostly because of some annoying facets, not because of their legitimate or lack thereof threat level. Broken Smiles have the hardest to hit weak spot, which coupled with their erratic movement makes them a pain to gun down with anyone other than Mask. In all my years playing Killer 7, I've only hit the cockpit once, and it was during the making of this video. They're also surprisingly sturdy, and since you can't pause when in hit stun, you better hope no other smile notices you as you're reeling. Giants are on the opposite end. They're easy to trick into self-terminating that it's better to fake them out than go for their eye weak spot. It's a problem of an odd hitbox mixed with timing, seeing as giants open and close their eyes. Poison are in that annoying category as well, only killed via critical, making the stage they populate, the second half of Sunset, kinda aggravating as the halls are littered with them in mother smiles. Kevin is about the only safe bet in the gambling den, as reloading is what'll send you to the cleaner. Bombheads are the only smiles I would consider downright scary, as they can always instantly kill you like their Coliseum encounter. Hitting their bombshell, whether when it's open or closed, causes a decently sized explosion that takes out anything nearby, including your sorry ass. The blind corners of Sunset prime you for this menace, but that's only half the issue. Smile respawn rate is especially aggressive in some stages, with certain smiles always spawning. Encounter's second stage is crawling with bomb heads anytime you're outside, and all it takes is one accidental misfire to put you on your toes as Garcian. It's better to eat the hit than risk scratching the shell, as recovering the body as the weak Garcian when smiles warp into existence 30 seconds after their death means a game over is highly probable. Best bet for bomb heads is Dan, as headlock on works wonders, but that just quells the immediate dilemma. Another bomb head will spawn right afterwards, and sometimes at too close a distance. It does speak a mountain though that bomb heads are one of the easier smiles in Killer 8 mode. Out of all of Suda's games, Killer 7 sticks with me the most. It's a game that has a lot of intrinsic replay value due to how its story pans out. You might not catch a smaller detail the first time through, or you can piece together a bit more of the ongoing plot by connecting the details. Killer 7 is like the Lament Configuration, a puzzle box hiding horror beyond comprehension. The simplified gameplay aids in keeping your mind on the real questions, which have a multitude of answers, as interpretation is the massive selling point. From my own experience, I can tell you my appreciation for Killer 7 has grown every time I've played it, relating concepts and ideas together that I might not have the last time I experienced it. It's hard not to call Killer 7 peak fiction because it's so mesmerizing, like a continual rabbit hole masquerading as an interactive piece of media. Even still, there are some aspects I still don't fully comprehend, like how Alter Ego's events play into the main plot, or First Life as a corporate entity, but that wherein lies the beauty of Killer 7. It keeps you theorizing about how everything comes together. A riddle wrapped in a puzzle blanketed by an enigma. How many face-offs have Harmon and Kunlun had? How divergent is this version of the world compared to ours? How many renditions of the Smith Syndicate existed? What about the remnant psyches? Who were the Smiths before they were absorbed into Harmon? Goichi Suda put himself right on the screen, unafraid to explore ideas that interested him, and he presented them in such a way that makes Killer 7 one of the most unique experiences I've ever had with games as a whole. You are doing yourself a disservice if you haven't played it, as it is the epitome of the range of subjects games can tackle, and doing so with having you at the steering wheel. For a debut in America, I have to hand it to Suda, as I still think this might be his weirdest game. It's either this, Michigan, or Killer is Dead that take the medal home for the strangest and in different ways. Michigan's whole atmosphere makes it a bizarre playthrough, Killer 7 its plot, and Killer the moment-to-moment bits. I guess I could also put Shadows of the Damned, which would be the follow-up between Shinji Mikami and Suda for EA, but there's a reason why it tends to be the forgotten entry within 51's library. And I own the damn thing, only to put it down right when most people do. The 5 turret segments in a row. Shadows could have been a smash hit, but sadly wasn't, much like No More Heroes 3, which I also dropped for a few reasons. That's the number one aspect you have to keep in mind with Suda. What you'll get will vary from hit dead on to barely squeaking past to surprising miss. His best games are Killer 7 and No More Heroes, and out of his whole collection, they are the most solid in all forms while still retaining his charm, while something like Lollipop Chainsaw has some neat ideas that's rough around the edges, while No More Heroes 3 feels like the de-evolution of the series and what made it fun to play. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/let's talk about games, no apostrophe in the let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the Showtime reels. March is the month of a song, one decadent and sweet, yet violent and malicious. 'Tis the song of Saya, which brings equal parts woe and hardship as it does love and understanding. And as always, this showing of Killer 7 is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving a few of the worst ads you've seen, martial arts abound, and heavy drug consumption.